Chapter 168. Shuanghu Island Industrial Zone. Chongping Pharmaceutical Factory. In the brand new workshop, one after another cylindrical machines hummed, making a roar that was inconsistent with this era. The valve below the centrifugal wall breaker, strands of elixir essence keep falling, was skillfully caught by the cultivators of the Qin family's blessing generation and then combined into a pill. Continuous practice for half a year. Countless times of blending into pills, the current cultivators of the blessing character, except for a few people, can easily blend a pill successfully with their eyes closed. After the medicinal pills were refined, they were skillfully put into jade bottles by female workers one by one, and then stored in boxes made of golden silk wood. So cooperate. Alchemists only need a simple action of synthesizing pills. As for putting the elixir into the centrifugal wall breaker, adjusting the speed of the machine, adjusting the speed at which the elixir essence flows, and filling the elixir into the bottle, they are all done by ordinary Qin clan members. Greatly improved the efficiency of alchemy. With the cooperation of the two sides for more than half a year. Whether it is an ordinary worker or a professional alchemist, the two sides have reached an excellent tacit understanding. Now, every alchemist can refine about 150 pills per day on average, which is nearly 1.5 times more efficient than the 100 pills per day at the beginning. Qin Daoyan looked at everyone's young figures and skilled operations. While feeling a little distressed, she couldn't help but feel proud of the Qin family. Such a long time. Not a single monk of the blessed generation complained of distress and tiredness. You know, they are only 7 years old this year. Hongyin Feijian Factory. The heat wave hit people, and the furnace operators and apprentices in the factory were all sweaty. Although the monk is strong, he did not sweat. But the long-term high-intensity refining of flying swords still makes everyone mentally exhausted. However, now everyone knows the catastrophe facing Guang'an Prefecture. Although they can't go to the front to kill the enemy, but producing magic weapons in the rear is no less effective than the soldiers on the front. Therefore, even the monks of the blessing generation, under the training of the monks of the Taoist generation, began to refine the first-order low-grade red shadow flying sword one by one. As for the earliest batch of Taoist monks, they have already begun to refine the first-order high-grade flying swords. Compared to Chongping Pharmaceutical Factory, Hongyin Feijian Factory has a much wider range of instruments and grades. Chongping No. 1 Xiuxian Primary School. Qin Xianhe is explaining the matters needing attention in practicing Guiyuan Gong for the newly enrolled monks of the Fuzi generation. Seemed to hear the birdsong outside the window, Qin Xianhe couldn't help looking out the window, and his thoughts gradually drifted further and further away. Old Patriarch. A Xianmiao of the Fu character generation seemed to notice that Qin Xianhe was distracted, and could not help calling out softly. Fine. Qin Xianhe smiled. Let's continue. Where did we just talk about? Yes, the technique of refining aura. Overlooked from above. The entire Shuanghu Island presents a thriving scene. But compared to the sparsely populated Shuanghu Island, Guanhai City on Sequoia Island is called the real prosperity. Thanks to the concerted efforts of the monks, Guanhai City has been almost completely completed. Leftover means that with the further expansion of the population, the urban circle continues to expand outward. The city structure of Wanxinghai is the same. The inner city of Guanhai City is the location of Xiancheng. However, now this fairy city can only be regarded as a large market at most. But as monks continue to gather towards Sequoia Island, this square city will definitely gradually evolve into a fairy city in the future. No one would doubt this. Xiancheng always has the characteristics of attracting monks. Because the immortal cities are built on the spiritual veins, and the scattered cultivators lack spiritual energy cultivation, this is also the reason why the Yang family built the spiritual veins for the scattered cultivators, and the scattered cultivators are so excited. Limba Island. The Great Hall of the Allied Forces headquarters in Guang'an Prefecture. I asked, the soldiers in the East Defense Zone are willing to exchange their military exploits for medicinal pills. After communicating with the East Defense Zone again, Zhou Minghe said. Chen Daoxian looked at Zhou Minghe and asked, if I don't know how to settle it by military merit, how to settle it? This point, let Dao Yu Zhang speak, heard the words. The red-haired cultivator surnamed Zhang nodded and said, according to the regulations of the Qianyuan sword sect, there are two types of merits in frontline battles, small merits and great merits. 100 minor merits can be exchanged for one major merit. In the frontline battlefield, a small effort can be exchanged for a spiritual stone. It's just that spirit stones cannot be exchanged for small merits. Chen Daoxian nodded clearly and exchanged unilaterally. After pondering for a moment, Chen Daoxian said, so, 10 small works can buy one medicinal pill, heard the words. The red-haired monk surnamed Zhang gave Chen Daoxian a deep look and smiled. Although Qianyuan Jianzong can't exchange spirit stones for military merits, privately, among soldiers, the exchange ratio of small merits and spirit stones is 10. Small work in exchange for 12 spirit stones. Zhou Minghe on the side of waved his hand and said, just follow the price that Dao Yuqin said. Then looked at Chen Daoxian and said, how many military exploits do you plan to exchange? I plan to exchange 50% of the spiritual pills supplied by the Chen family for military merits. 50%. Zhou Minghe nodded, okay, no problem, on behalf of the Guang'an Prefecture Allied Forces, I agree to your Chen family's request. Thank you Senior Zhou. Chen Daoxian arched his hand. No, it should be me thanking you. Zhou Minghe said solemnly, if you win this battle, your Chen family's contribution is great. Don't dare, don't dare. Chen Daoxian waved his hands again and again. But he also knew that the Chen family did a lot of credit for supporting the shaky logistics of the Guang'an Allied forces at this time. Next. The Zhou family directly dispatched 2 Lingshu battleships, together with Chen Daoxian, to return to Shuanghu Island to get the spiritual elixir. 1 day later. Chen Daoxian returned with the 2 spirit void battleships. Far away. He saw Zhou Minghe waiting eagerly in front of the headquarters hall. Seeing that boxes of elixir were removed from the spirit void battleship, Zhou Minghe couldn't wait to step forward, opened the wooden box, and looked at the bottled elixir in the wooden box. Zhou Minghe's face was full of joy. Good. 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 Zhou Minghe took out a bottle of elixir at random, opened the seal, and a scent of medicine wafted through his nostrils. Is the detoxification pill that is in short supply on the front line. Seeing Zhou Minghe check the medicinal pills in person, Chen Daoxian introduced, this time my Chen family brought a total of 540,000 detoxification pills, 300,000 broken evil pills, and 230,000 Qi Hui pills, a total of 1.07 million spirit pills. Dan. Zhou Minghe's consciousness was swept away, and he knew that what Chen Daoxian said was not bad. Nodded immediately and said, according to the price we agreed, 50% of the pills will be paid for with spiritual stones, and the other 50% will be paid for military merits. The coalition forces in the eastern defense area will need to pay your Chen family 5.35 million spiritual stones and 53,500 great merits. I have prepared the spirit stone for you, you can withdraw it at any time, as for the military exploits. He looked at the red-haired purple manor monk beside him. The red-haired monk nodded and said, since the soldiers on the front line are willing to pay for their military exploits, I can transfer the military exploits of the coalition forces in the eastern defense zone to your Chen family. Finished. I saw him take out a disc-shaped instrument and tap it lightly. Immediately, a screen of light projected in front of everyone. This is the Arc Shadow Disc, a special instrument specially made by Qianyuan Jianzong to record military exploits. To briefly introduce, the red-haired monk kept sliding his fingertips on the light curtain projection. When Chen Daoxian saw this scene, he suddenly felt like watching a holographic projection in a high-tech movie. The red-haired cultivator didn't know what Chen Daoxian was thinking, and after some manipulations, he nodded and said, okay, the 53,500 meritorious deeds have all been allocated to your name. You can use these military exploits to exchange for various resources given by Qianyuan's sword sect. Finished. He handed Chen Daoxian a jade slip. Here records the types and prices of resources that can be exchanged in Qianyuan Jianzong. You can take it back and learn more about it, said, with an inexplicable smile on his face. It's the first time I've seen that people who haven't been on the front line can get so many military exploits. Hearing this, Chen Daoxian's expression froze slightly. Seems to think that Chen Daoxian has misunderstood. The red-haired cultivator waved his hand and said, fellow Daoist Chen, don't misunderstand, I just think that your Chen family cultivator's luck is really good. By the good words of my predecessors, my Chen family cultivator has always had good luck. Hearing this, the red-haired monk stopped talking. Actually, Chen Daoxian also knew that. This red-haired cultivator from the Purple Mansion, as a cultivator from the frontline, must have gone through countless battles to get to where he is today. Unfortunately, his fighting for so many years is actually not as good as Chen Daoxian's business this time. Such a huge disparity, how could it not make him feel uneasy? In a flash, he also understood that these military exploits were not owned by Chen Daoxian alone, but were earned by the hundreds of alchemists of the Chen family who worked hard for a year, so he had nothing to be jealous of. Went back to the Lingfu where the Zhou family had prepared for him. Chen Daoxian impatiently took out the jade slip in the storage bag and looked over it carefully. The resources given by Qianyuan Jianzong are almost everything. But in general, they are roughly divided into two categories. The first one is knowledge. The second is the material category. The so-called knowledge category includes exercises, spells, alchemy inheritance, utensil refining inheritance, talisman inheritance, formation inheritance, puppet art. The material category is all kinds of treasures, such as unprocessed spiritual minerals, spiritual medicines, spiritual plants, and even all kinds of rare spiritual things. There are also processed treasures, such as instruments, elixir, charms, array plates and so on. Look through it roughly. In general, it is the most cost-effective to exchange for knowledge-based resources with military exploits, but it is not as cost-effective to exchange for material-based resources as to buy them with spirit stones. The various resources in the jade slip simply dazzled Chen Daoxian, and he didn't know how to choose. Fortunately, he had a clear goal this time. First of all, it must be exchanged for cultivation techniques for the family monks. At present, the Qin family has only one foundation building exercise, Qiyang Gong, which was purchased from the auction house last time. This exercise is not bad, but it is indeed too common, and the range of choices is too narrow. In the future, the cultivators of the Qin family will not all practice one type of exercise. If there is a monk with a water attribute spirit body in the Qin family in the future, wouldn't there be no exercises to practice? Therefore, for the 5 elements, the Qin family must have at least one foundation building period and even the Zifu period. And it is best to use the kind of exercise with a very high ceiling. For example, Qianyuan Jianzong's Zhenzong Gongfa, Qianyuan Sword Classic, is such a very high-capacity method. Chen Daoxian searched carefully and found that the Qianyuan Sword Classic was listed impressively. I heard before that Qianyuan Jianzong's General Sect's Zhenzong exercises were exchanged for the monks on the front line. Now I look at it and it is true. Chen Daoxian took a closer look and found some differences. Chapter 169. Qianyuan Sword Sutra is indeed available for frontline monks to exchange, but it is only limited to the content of the Foundation Establishment period and the Purple Palace period. Follow-up exercises can also be exchanged with Qianyuan Jianzong, but then the monks must go to Qianyuan Jianzong to exchange them in person. This is to prevent the enemies of Izumo from breaking into Wangxinghai and defrauding Qianyuan Jianzong's Zhenzong exercise. Sure enough, there are restrictions. Chen Daoxian nodded. That's right, if there are no restrictions at all, Chen Daoxian will be surprised. You must know that this Qianyuan sword classic is said to be passed down by Qianyuanzi, the founder of the Qianyuan sword sect. And Qianyuanzi is the true immortal of Mahayana, the kind of powerful cultivator who finally ascended to the upper realm. The exercises he left behind were actually spread so widely by the younger generations. This moment, Chen Daoxian couldn't help but be very curious about the suzerain of Qianyuan sword sect. What kind of person could have such great courage and courage? Actually spread the Zongzong method to the world without hesitation. At least, let Chen Daoxian now spread the knowledge of Chen family's unique industrial alchemy and tool refining. He is not very willing. Although he knew that doing so would quickly increase the strength of the entire Wanxinghai. But whether Chen Daoxian is short-sighted or only considers his own family, he cannot be so selfless and spread the knowledge of industrialization to the world. At least in the eyes of Chen Daoxian now, the only people who can be truly recognized by him are the 13th uncle and the Chen family cultivators whose blood is thicker than water. The foundation building period, Qianyuan Sword Sutra, requires 10,000 great deeds, and the Zifu period, Qianyuan Sword Sutra, Sai. Chen Daoxian took a deep breath. 100,000 great merits is equivalent to 10,000 spiritual stones. Just such a practice that is only limited to oneself, it is actually equivalent to a third-order spiritual vein. He thought he had 53,500 great merits and was already very rich, but after seeing the exchange price of the Qianyuan Sword Classic, he felt that he was still very poor. He now vaguely understands why the sect master of Qianyuan Sword Sect would take out this top-level exercise and exchange it. I would like to ask the monks who practice the Qianyuan Sword Sutra in the foundation building period, are they willing to switch to other exercises with mediocre power after entering the Zifu in the future? Certainly not reconciled. Since he is not reconciled, he has to work hard to earn military exploits and swear to the death for Qianyuan Jianzong. It can be said that Qianyuan Jianzong only used this technique to capture the hearts of thousands of swordsmen in Wanxinghai. And what is the combat power of the sword cultivator? Chen Daoxian himself has experience as a sword cultivator. He has no doubt now that Zhou Mubai must be practicing this technique. As a sword cultivator, as a cultivator who claims to be the same level of combat power ceiling, no one wants to be weaker than other cultivators. Even Zhou Mubai failed to comprehend the sword intent during the qi refining period, and he was always upset. Because compared to Chen Daoxian, he lost an opportunity to temper his infuriating energy, and he was always 1 point weaker than Chen Daoxian of the same rank. For swordsmen, this weak point is often the gap between heaven and earth. Changed. He glanced at the Qianyuan Sword Sutra of the foundation building period and decided to exchange it. Continue reading. Chen Daoxian no longer rummaged in the knowledge category, but in the elixir category. Found it. Chen Daoxian's face was full of surprise. Millennium Vermilion Fruit. Looking at the red jade-like spiritual fruit in the jade slip, Chen Daoxian's face was full of excitement. This is exactly the 1,000-year-old vermilion fruit he saw at the Guang'an House auction event. It is said that it has the effect of prolonging life for 30 years. This time, Chen Daoxian no longer had to be discouraged by Uncle 13, and decided to exchange it decisively. The exchange price of Millennium Zhugua is 15,000 great merits, which is half more expensive than the Qianyuan Sword Sutra in the foundation period. But Chen Daoxian thinks it's worth it. Without Uncle 13's silent persistence, the Chen family may have vanished long ago, and there is no place for today's rise. All the cultivators of the Chen family should appreciate the credit of Qin Xianhe. This treasure of longevity, Qin Xianhe, deserves it. Decided to exchange the Qianyuan Sword Sutra and the Millennium Vermilion Fruit in the foundation building period. Chen Daoxian only has 28,500 meritorious deeds left. Thinking of this, he couldn't help but feel a sense of urgency in his heart. Look for other 5-element exercises. Chen Daoxian took a deep breath and continued to find a method for the future foundation building monks of the Chen family. Soon, 5 elements cultivation techniques with the highest upper limit up to the nascent soul stage were selected by Qin Daoxian. Of course, he is worth exchanging for this part of the foundation establishment stage, a complete exercise that goes directly to the nascent soul stage, which is not something Qin Daoxian can exchange. There is actually a difference between personal exchange and family exchange in exchange for this exercise. Qin Daoxian had a headache. The Qianyuan Sword Classic he chose was a personal exchange. That is to say, when he redeems this practice, he must make an oath of the Great Way, and he can only practice it himself and cannot pass it on to others. And the family exchange is that this exercise can be practiced by all the cultivators of the Qin family. The exchange price of this exercise is 10 times more expensive than the personal exchange. In fact, after careful calculation, family exchange is definitely more cost-effective than personal exchange. Because it is impossible for a normal family to have only 10 monks. The inheritance of the refining equipment that the monks of the Qin family Xianzi generation exchanged for Qianyuan Jianzong was the family exchange. Qin Daoxian turned back to the introduction of Qianyuan Sword Classic again, and found that there was no family exchange, only personal exchange. See this. His face was full of anger. I thought I could pick up a big bargain, but I didn't expect that Qianyuan Jianzong had already considered everything. Think carefully. Since this war merit system has been implemented for 400 years, even if there were loopholes, it must have been blocked by Qianyuan Jianzong long ago. Forget it, anyway, besides me, my Qin family doesn't have a second sword cultivator. It would be a waste to exchange 10 times the price for this Qianyuan Sword Classic. Qin Daoxian comforted himself. Individuals can exchange the 5 elements of the foundation building period with 2,500 great merits, but for family exchanges, the price is 10 times higher and requires 25,000 great merits now. Qin Daoxian only has 3,500 great merits left. High-level exercises that can be practiced to the nascent soul stage are too expensive. Qin Daoxian's face was full of distress. This is only a part of the foundation building period. If the complete exercise is exchanged, wouldn't it be ruined? Now he finally knows what Qianyuan Jianzong relies on to pay for the military expenses of countless monks on the front line. Is to rely on these intangible knowledge such as exercises, spells, swordsmanship, inheritance and so on. And these are what the loose cultivators, and even the family cultivators, lack the most. As for family cultivators or loose cultivators who get these exercises, their strength will grow and they will be able to compete with Qianyuan Sword Sect. Is totally overthinking it. Qianyuan Sword Sect in the process of attacking Chuyun Kingdom, most of the plundered resources were digested and absorbed by it. In addition, Qianyuan Jianzong's basic plan in the underwater world of Wangxinghai, and its various inheritances are more complete and complex than any force in Wangxinghai. In addition, it has an uncountable mortal population in its vast territory, and its legacy as a Mahayana true immortal lineage. I feel that I have acquired a few exercises and I want to resist the Qianyuan Sword Sect. The end is definitely 100 times worse than the real Shinjue. Shinjue Jinren still got the complete inheritance of immortals, and there is also a fairy mansion cave where he can escape. The major families of Wan Xinghai, including the Yuanying family, which one has this condition? There is still 3,500 great merits, what can I exchange for it? Qin Daoxian rummaged through the jade slip again. It can be said that he wants everything in it. Whether it is various inheritances or substantial treasures, it can quickly increase the strength of the Qin family. But helpless. Too few military exploits. Oh, I'll choose you. After searching for a long time, Qin Daoxian reluctantly withdraws his consciousness from the jade slip. What he finally chose was not inheritance, not treasure, but a formation, to be precise, a fourth-order mountain protection formation. Logically speaking, arranging a fourth-order array is beyond Qin Daoxian's ability. However, he has the Hongmeng Enlightenment Classic hanging on it, and he has a deep knowledge of the formation method. I believe that with careful study, he will be able to arrange this formation method sooner or later. He glanced at the various formation materials of this fourth-order mountain protection formation. Is not a rare thing, it is something that can be purchased in Gwang'an Prefecture. Since it's something that Gwang'an Prefecture can buy, isn't it just a matter of spending some spirit stones? This spiritual stone, not to mention that the Chen family is not short of it now. There are still nearly 70 million spiritual stones lying in the main hall of the Western Defense District headquarters alone. To know. Arranging the mountain protection formation is not only a matter of the Chen family. Seaview City on Sequoia Island also needs to arrange this formation. The Chen family bought the knowledge of the great formation of protecting the mountain, and the spirit stones in the West Defense area were used to buy the materials for the formation. It was very fair, and no one could say a word. Seeing that he only had 500 great merits left, Chen Daoxian put the jade slip into the storage bag in distress. Now that it has been decided, I will go to the red-haired monk surnamed Zhang to exchange it tomorrow. 1,000-year-old vermilion fruit may need to be specially transported. But all kinds of knowledge inheritance, he should be able to get it on the spot. These things, he has already asked Zhou Mingho to learn more about them. The next day, Chen Daoxian registered the various resources he wanted to exchange one by one. The red-haired monk followed Chen Daoxian's words and his cheeks kept twitching. Are you sure you want to exchange the Qianyuan Sword Classic for this exercise? Sure. Chen Daoxian nodded. Make an oath. Immediately. Chen Daoxian made an oath to promise not to spread the Qianyuan Sword Classic. Next moment, the red-haired friar took out the arc shadow disc and moved it on it again. Soon, a slender beam of light shot out from the arc shadow disc and went straight to the center of Chen Daoxian's eyebrows. Chen Daoxian knew that this was the normal procedure for exchanging exercises. He then closed his eyes. In the next second, a mysterious and unusual exercise appeared in his sea of consciousness. Before taking a closer look, Chen Daoxian opened his eyes and looked curiously at the arc shadow plate in the other's hand, saying, "This magic weapon is really amazing. Of course, this is an important guarantee for the perfect implementation of my Qianyuan Jianzong war merit system. Otherwise, it would be so easy for countless cultivators on the front line to exchange merit methods." Heard this, Chen Daoxian nodded in agreement. He is also an artifact refiner, and he can clearly know how amazing the talent that the person who refines this artifact possesses. Chen Daoxian created new instruments, relying on the Hongmeng Enlightenment Classic to store his understanding. And this item refiner relies entirely on his own amazing talent. A glimpse of the leopard in the pipe can be seen. What a crouching tiger, hidden dragon in Qianyuan Jianzong. Chapter 170. The knowledge of the 6 exercises and formations was transmitted to Chen Daoxian's sea of knowledge. Even with his spiritual strength comparable to that of a cultivator in the Purple House, also felt a little exhausted. The red-haired monk surnamed Zhang glanced at Chen Daoxian and said, "The 1,000-year-old vermilion fruit you want will take some time to be delivered." Hearing this, Chen Daoxian frowned. After a while, "Right," the red-haired cultivator inquired and said, "You are lucky, Zhangzhou Xianqing happens to have a frontline transport ship at the moment, and it can come over in about 3 days. However, the shipping fee is yours to pay." Shipping fee? Chen Daoxian looked surprised. Of course there is a transportation fee, otherwise a frontline transport ship will make a trip just for you. How much face do you have to have? Hearing this, Chen Daoxian said helplessly, "Didn't you say that the frontline transport ship is in Zhangzhou Xianqing? Can't I get it myself?" Hearing the words, the red-haired cultivator's face was full of deep meaning. Transporting various resources for the frontline soldiers can also be regarded as a fortune for an adult in Qianyuan Jianzong. "Are you sure you want to do this?" This. Chen Daoxian bowed his hands. "Junior doesn't know about it, I hope Senior will forgive me," involves the interests of the top officials of Qianyuan Jianzong, so he will naturally not break this rule and only make others unhappy. It's just about spending some spirit stones or military exploits, there's no need to offend people. Seeing Qin Daoxian being so knowledgeable, the red-haired cultivator couldn't help but think highly of him. In Wangxinghai, there are many talented cultivators who are frivolous and ignorant when they are young, but unknowingly offend many people they cannot afford to offend. These monks often end up miserably. Obviously, the sword cultivator named Qin Daoxian in front of him knows how to advance and retreat, and how to choose. At this moment, he finally understood why the Zhou family and the Yang family were so optimistic about the young monk in front of him. Is definitely not just because of his kendo talent, but also other qualities in him. If a person has only talent, but he makes enemies everywhere, this kind of person is destined to not go far. Only people like Qin Daoxian who are talented and have a good government can go a long way on the complicated path of cultivation. To transport 1,000-year-old vermilion fruit from Cangzhou Xianqing to this point, you need to pay 100 great merits or 10,000 spirit stones. You can choose any payment method. I choose to use spirit stones. The red-haired monk surnamed Zhang nodded. Qin Daoxian's choice was not surprising to him. On the frontline battlefield of Izumo, most monks who need to exchange special resources use spiritual stones to pay for transportation. After all, meritorious deeds can buy many resources that cannot be purchased by spirit stones. In the eyes of monks, it is much more precious than spirit stones. Otherwise, it will not be possible to exchange 12 spirit stones among soldiers for 10 small work. Waited less than 3 days. A ray of light galloped toward the Zhou family's residence in Xiancheng, Guang'an Prefecture. Qin Daoxian stood in front of the main hall. His eyes narrowed slightly, and he found that the person in front of him was also a cultivator of the Purple Mansion, but his cultivation was too low, so he could not tell which level of cultivation he was in the Purple Mansion. But he could feel that the other party was by no means an early cultivator of the Purple Mansion. The person who came was wearing a blue Taoist robe, with a jade crown on his head holding up Taoism, his face was thin, and he looked in good spirits. Seeing the monk surnamed Zhang Zifu, the visitor immediately bowed his hands and said, "Brother Zhang." The red-haired monk surnamed Zhang nodded. "Have you brought something?" "Bring it, that's it," said. The visitor took out a jade box from the storage bag, and the entire jade box was banned and sealed. "See you." The red-haired cultivator surnamed Zhang took the jade box from the young Zifu cultivator and handed it to Qin Daoxian. "The 1,000-year-old vermilion fruit you want, check it out." "Okay." Qin Daoxian couldn't wait to take the jade box, and immediately lifted the ban on the jade box. After checking it carefully, he nodded and said, "It's right." After he finished speaking, he looked at the Zifu cultivator who delivered the goods for him, and thanked him, "Senior Lao. No trouble, no trouble. If there is such a good thing in the future, just call me more. My name is Zhengheng." This Zifu cultivator named Zhengheng bowed his hands politely, and did not look down on Qin Daoxian because of his low cultivation. Seeing him looking at him eagerly, Qin Daoxian immediately took out a storage bag from his waist, handed it over, and said, "This is the spirit stone I prepared, Senior, please take a look," heard the words. Zhengheng took the storage bag without hesitation, immersed his consciousness into the storage bag in front of the two of them, and counted them. It doesn't take a moment. Zhengheng raised his head, smiled and cupped his hands. "Yes, it is exactly 10,000 spirit stones." Qin Daoxian hurriedly returned the salute. Zhengheng nodded, greeted the red-haired monk surnamed Zhang, and disappeared in front of the two of them. Watching Zhengheng leave, Qin Daoxian bowed his hands to the red-haired monk surnamed Zhang and said, "That being the case, it is time for the junior to return to the West Defense Zone to sit in town." The red-haired monk nodded and said, "Walk slowly, no delivery. Farewell." "Say it." Qin Daoxian flew towards Shuanghu Island together. This time, Qin Daoxian had to go back and digest it properly in order to exchange his military exploits for various resources. To his surprise, the price of high-level exercises is too expensive. But fortunately, in Wangxinghai, monks actually have a way to get high-level exercises. The practice of Qianyuan sword sect undoubtedly gave the lowest-level scattered cultivators a ladder to high-level cultivators. This is also the reason why, for 400 years, there has been an endless stream of middle and high-level cultivators. Less than half a day. Qin Daoxian converged and landed on the spiritual vein of the Qin family on Shuanghu Island. Feeling the abundant aura of the second-order spiritual veins, Qin Daoxian couldn't help showing a smile on his face. The consciousness swept away, without alarming anyone. Qin Daoxian hurried straight towards the clan. Chongping No. 1 Xiuxian Primary School. The second batch of Xianmiao of Fuzi generation has been in school for half a year. Clanology. In addition to Qin Xianhe, an old teacher who has been here all the year round, young Taoist monks often come to the clan as a guest teacher to teach all kinds of knowledge to the children of Fuzi. On the contrary, it was Qin Daoxian, because he was busy in the family. In the past 2 years, there are only a handful of hours in the ethnology. Even the kendo classes and talisman classes he taught were often absent due to lack of teachers. Kendo class is fine. Qin Xianhe can temporarily substitute. After all, Qin Xianhe has been immersed in the wind-chasing sword art for a lifetime, and has already reached the realm of culmination. Pointing at the cultivator of the Fuzi generation who doesn't understand anything, there is still no problem. Talisman making class, there is no monk in the Qin family who can replace Qin Daoxian. Because other than Qin Daoxian, the Qin family did not have any monks who knew how to make magic charms. At the moment, when Qin Daoxian walked to the door of the classroom, Qin Xianhe was teaching kendo lessons on his behalf. The essence of wind-chasing sword art lies in a quick word. Qin Xianhe said, and took out a red shadow flying sword from the storage bag. The red shadow flying sword circled above everyone's heads under his control. Not for a while. The red shadow flying sword turned into a phantom, which could not be seen clearly. When the flying sword is approaching a certain level, it will not only increase its power, but also make the enemy hard to guard against. If you cultivate to the extreme, before the cultivator's consciousness can react, your flying sword has already taken off the opponent's head. The words fall. The flying sword suddenly disappeared in front of everyone's eyes. In the next instant, the flying sword suddenly appeared in front of the forehead of a monk of the blessing generation, and hovered suddenly. Wow! In the classroom, the monks of the Fu character generation clapped their hands, and a thunderous applause erupted. Ha ha ha! Seeing this scene, Qin Xianhe stroked his beard and laughed happily. Compared with the boring and complicated knowledge of alchemy, the flying sword class always makes it easier for the monks of the blessing generation to feel obsessed. Unfortunately, Qin Daoxian, who set up this course, did not seriously teach a few kendo lessons to monks of the Fuzi generation from beginning to end. Outside the classroom, Qin Daoxian couldn't help laughing when he saw such a harmonious scene between the old and the young of the Qin family. On campus, Qin Xianhe and Qin Daoxian walked side by side on the avenue of the campus. Your breath-holding technique is getting more and more powerful. Standing by my side, I didn't even know you were back. Qin Xian Hitsang Lao's face was full of complicated colors. Qin Daoxian smiled and said, "It's not that my breath-holding technique is excellent, it's that Uncle 13 is too serious in your teaching, and that's why you didn't realize that I came back." Heard the words. Qin Xianhe smiled and waved his hand, "Don't console me, I'm not a child, haha." After finished speaking, the conversation changed. "By the way, how did the medicine pills you sell to the front line sell well? Half of it is settled with spirit stones, and half of it is with military merit, for a total of 53,500 great merits." "So much?" Qin Xianhe glanced at him in surprise, calculated a little, and nodded. "So, we made a profit, although one small merit can be exchanged for one spirit stone, but if you want to use spirit stone to buy battle merit, you have to pay a lot of premium." "Indeed." Qin Daoxian nodded. Immediately, he took out a jade box and said with a smile, by the way, I bought you a gift for Uncle 13 on this trip. Seeing this, Chen Xianhe paused slightly. He took the jade box handed over by Chen Daoxian with a surprised look, and slowly opened it after the restriction was lifted. I see. A red, jade-like spiritual fruit, lying quietly in the jade box. 1000. Millennium Vermilion Fruit. Chen Xian's voice trembled slightly, and looked at Chen Daoxian suddenly, not knowing what to say. Daoxian thought that my Chen family still needs Uncle 13 to work for the family for a while. After finished speaking, he looked at Chen Xianhe with a smile on his face. Heard the words. Chen Xianhe was in a very complicated mood. If you ask Chen Xianhe if he is afraid of death, he must be afraid of death. Anyone who is still conscious is not afraid of death. But let Chen Xianhe sacrifice his family interests in exchange for his survival, he would rather die. Just. Chapter 171. Twin Lakes Island. In Chen Daoxuan's Spirit Palace. In front of Ling Tan. Chen Daoxian crossed his knees on the futon made by Wen Yu, slowly closed his eyes, and his consciousness sank into the sea of consciousness space. In the sea of consciousness space. In the most central position, the golden scriptures seem to be immortal and towering mountains, suppressing the sea of knowledge space. Surrounding the golden scriptures are 9 faint stardust. They chase each other, keep spinning, mysterious and beautiful. Deeper in the sea of knowledge space, there are clusters of light-emitting rays of light. These light clusters store all the knowledge Chen Daoxian has learned in his past and present life. There are professional knowledge of machinery in the past life, as well as the knowledge of exercises, swordsmanship, tool refining, alchemy, and talisman practice in this life, and so on. These clusters of light vary in size. But there are 7 light groups, which are a bit out of tune with the other light groups, as if they were forcibly stuffed into the sea of consciousness space. Chen Daoxian knew. The knowledge stored in these 7 light groups is precisely what the red-haired cultivator surnamed Zhang held in the Arc Shadow Disc and forcibly stuffed it into his sea of consciousness. Among them, including the exercise that Chen Daoxian will practice next, Qianyuan Sword Classic. Take a deep breath. Chen Daoxian sank his consciousness into the light group that reproduced the Qianyuan Sword Sutra. Next second. Chen Daoxian only felt that his head suddenly exploded. Countless mysterious exercises and profound meanings rushed towards him like a tide. Chen Daoxian restrained his mind, and accepted and absorbed the knowledge of these exercises as if they were swallowed whole. Otherwise, it is not easy for him to comprehend the Qianyuan Sword Classic by himself. Chen Daoxian knew that the more top-level exercises, the more difficult it would be to cultivate. The difficulty here, the first level, is the comprehension of the exercises. Some cultivators at the foundation establishment stage, even if they have obtained top-level exercises, cannot even understand the most basic understanding, let alone start practicing. Chen Daoxian has the assistance of the Hongmeng Enlightenment Classic, and he has never been afraid of single understanding. With the complete reading of the Qianyuan Sword Sutra, foundation building exercises content, Chen Daoxuan's face became a little weird. The road to the strongest sword cultivation recorded in the Qianyuan Sword Classic is much more detailed than the introduction to the swordsmanship jade slip given by Zhou Mubai. In this practice, it mentions a concept called limit states. The so-called limit state is the limit quality that the cultivator can achieve in the cultivation base, true qi, true essence, and mana. For example, when Chen Daoxian was in the qi refining period, he used the sword intent to temper his true qi. Compared with the qi refining cultivator of the same cultivation level, it is 3 times stronger. This state is called the limit state by the Qianyuan Sword Classic. To reach this limit state, sword intent tempering is just one of the means. Some monks have talents that other monks cannot envy, such as various spiritual bodies and treasures. This special physique, after cultivating the exercises of the corresponding attributes, will also have a tempering effect on one's own true qi, true essence and mana. For example, Yang family Tianjiao Yang Gongwan's water spirit body has this kind of tempering effect. However, compared with Jian Xiu's sword intent, the tempering effect is slightly worse. If there is a person who possesses this kind of spiritual body and comprehends the sword intent, wouldn't that be able to double temper his own true essence, so as to achieve the effect that his true essence surpasses the mana of the cultivator of Zifu? But in fact, it is true that double tempering can be achieved, but the effect of the second tempering will be greatly reduced. A foundation-building cultivator, no matter how tempered his true essence is, will not exceed the mana of even the most common Zifu cultivator. At most, it can only reach 70% to 80% of the mana of the cultivator of Zifu. The true essence of this state is described as the ultimate true essence in the Qianyuan Sword Sutra. There are not many ways to achieve this ultimate true essence. One is as mentioned above, with both a spirit body and sword intent in the foundation building stage, and under double tempering, this limit state can be reached. There is one more. Just like Chen Daoxian, although he does not have a spiritual body, he has already tempered his true qi with sword intent during the qi refining period. The background is even more than that of other swordsmen. There is also a chance to reach this ultimate true essence. But no matter how monstrous the cultivator is, no matter how many times he tempers his true essence, he can only reach this limit state of true essence at most. Because of the so-called limit state true essence, if one step forward, it will transform into the mana of the Zifu cultivator. It is impossible for the real essence to be stronger than the mana. It is far stronger than mana, which proves that it has transformed into mana. Seeing this, Chen Daoxuan's previous thought that true yuan would grow infinitely under the tempering of sword intent shattered like a bubble. How can there be such a detailed explanation for the ordinary foundation building exercises, the value of these 10,000 great gong flowers? Chen Daoxian grinned. Some doubts about the foundation building stage cultivation in the past were all solved at this moment. As Chen Daoxian continued to watch Qianyuan Sword Sutra, he stood up from time to time and paced the courtyard in excitement. From time to time, he gestured in his hands, verifying his previous conjectures about cultivation at the foundation establishment stage. At this moment, he really realized the gap between top-level exercises and ordinary foundation building exercises. After the sword cultivator understands the sword intent, he can actually create his own sword art. Seeing this content recorded in the Qianyuan Sword Classic, Chen Daoxuan's eyes lit up. He suddenly remembered. When he and Zhou Mubai were investigating Lotus Island together, they were trapped in a great formation of corpses and blood. The sword trick that Zhou Gou finally burst out, he seems to have never seen it in the exchanged jade slips of Qianyuan Jianzong. Think of this. Chen Daoxian took out the exchanged jade slip of Qianyuan Jianzong from the storage bag again. Looking through it carefully again, I didn't find the Qinglian sword art that Mubai used. Think so. This Qinglian sword art should have been created by Zhou Mubai himself. Zhou Mubai's sword intent realm had long since broken through the invisible realm, reaching the second-level visible realm, and he had walked a considerable distance from the second-level visible realm. It is estimated that they are almost touching the threshold of the third heavy sword intent. Compare. When Chen Daoxian was building the foundation, his kendo realm advanced greatly, but he just crossed the threshold of the tangible realm. Until now, his kendo level was still far behind Zhou Mubai's. However, Chen Daoxian was not discouraged. After all, compared with Zhou Mubai, the age gap between the two is too big. Chen Daoxuan's own kendo talent may be far inferior to Zhou Mubai, but with the blessing of Hongmeng Enlightenment Classic, he believes that his kendo talent is no less than that of any kendo genius in the world. This is called lack of talent, plugins to make up. Call. After reading the entire contents of Qianyuan Sword Classic, Chen Daoxian breathed a sigh of relief. Just wait for tomorrow. After accumulating 10 star dusts, he began to comprehend this practice, and when he was thoroughly comprehended, he would begin to practice the Qianyuan Sword Sutra. For monks, converting to practice is a very troublesome thing. The lower the cultivation base, the smaller the price paid for switching to the cultivation technique. It is basically a common choice for all people to switch to practice during the foundation building period. Generally, the exercises cultivated by monks in the Qi period are some non-attribute peace exercises. Although the power is average, they are better than neutral and peaceful. When the foundation is established, there is no obstacle to switching to other exercises. But if the cultivator cultivated to the Purple Mansion or even the Jindan cultivation base, and then wanted to switch to the cultivation method, the price to pay would be huge. According to legend, there was once a Jindan cultivator who was moved after he got a practice that was especially suitable for him. Then he chose to switch to this practice. As a result, it took nearly 50 years of time before and after the practice to completely turn around. To know, 50 years is quite a long time even for a Jindan cultivator. After all, Jindan cultivator's lifespan is only 800 years old. And this cultivator must have spent hundreds of years cultivating to the golden core stage. That is to say, the life essence he actually has left is only a few hundred years. 50 years of time were wasted all at once, just to switch to another practice, and there was no progress in the cultivation during this time. Perhaps, this Jindan cultivator completely lost the opportunity to break through the nascent soul stage because of the practice of cultivation. How big the loss is, any cultivator with a slightly clearer mind can measure it. Of course, the cost of switching to cultivation techniques during the foundation establishment period is much lower. In particular, the exercise that Chen Daoxian cultivated during his Qi refining period was Guiyuan Gong, which was praised as the most suitable foundation for Wan Xinghai. It is easier to switch to other exercises. Normally, as long as Chen Daoxian comprehends the Qianyuan Sword Sutra thoroughly, he will be able to convert the practice in about a year. By the time he can improve his cultivation level again and move towards a higher cultivation level. Of course, the fact that he cannot improve his cultivation this year does not mean that his strength cannot be improved. In fact, Qianyuan Sword Sutra, as a top-level sword cultivator exclusive exercise, can also increase the true essence of sword cultivators like other attribute exercises. Help Jiangxia's true essence reach the limit faster. Chen Daoxian estimated that after the complete revision of the Qianyuan Sword Sutra, the strength of his true essence could increase to 70% to 80% at most. But this 70% to 80% is not achieved overnight, but increased step by step in the process of converting to cultivation techniques this year. So, the following year, although his cultivation can't be improved, his strength will not stop like the period of time when he was polishing his true essence. In front of Ling Tan, Chen Daoxian once again restrained his mind, and slowly polished his true essence, which was almost like an arm's finger. Soon, the night has passed. Looking at the white fish maw in the sky, the first rays of sunshine shone on his handsome face, setting him off as if a fairy was in the world. Chen Daoxian opened his eyes. A smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. Subsequently, he recited the Hongmeng Enlightenment Sutra silently again. If you think about it carefully, he has probably been reciting this scripture since the first time he lit up the sea of consciousness. It has been more than 10 years. But since he discovered the function of Hongmeng Enlightenment Dao Jing to store understanding, he has really risen all the way. It can be said that at least 8 of his achievements today are due to this golden scripture. But today, after Chen Daoxian silently recited the Hongmeng Enlightenment Classic, his face suddenly changed dramatically. Chapter 172. How could this be? Chen Daoxian looked inside the sea of consciousness space. 10 stardust spun and chased, but after accumulating 10 stardust, the force that would attract each other disappeared. Even Qin Daoxian consciously controlled 10 stardust to collide together. Next second, the 10 stars will be scattered again. How could this be? Qin Daoxian muttered. His first reaction was that the Hongmeng Enlightenment Classic's ability to store understanding had disappeared. But then, he felt something was wrong. If the ability of the Hongmeng Enlightenment Classic to store comprehension disappears, how can the 10 stardust be explained? After all these years of constant meditation on the scriptures, Qin Daoxian also has his own understanding of the Hongmeng Enlightenment Classic. These stardust accumulated in the space of his sea of consciousness are the concretization of his understanding when he usually recites scriptures silently. Qin Daoxian didn't know what kind of power the Hongmeng Enlightenment Classic actually had, and he could even concretize something as ethereal as comprehension. But this does not prevent him from using this function of the Hongmeng Enlightenment Classic. But now, there is a problem with this function. This makes Qin Daoxian, who has been relying on it for a long time, indifferent. Take a deep breath. Qin Daoxian began to analyze it carefully. Now that the stardust is still there, it proves that the Hongmeng Enlightenment Classic still has the ability to store understanding. The inability to merge into one means that it can no longer make Qin Daoxian realize. And he couldn't get an epiphany, and it was divided into two situations. First, in the future, it will be impossible to have an epiphany, no matter how much insight is stored in the Hongmeng Enlightenment Classic. Second, the threshold of epiphany has been raised. Think of this. Qin Daoxian's eyes lit up slightly. That's right, just like a monk's cultivation will be promoted. Qin Daoxian silently recited the Hongmeng Enlightenment Classic for so many years, and there will be new breakthroughs. Just like when he recited the Hongmeng Enlightenment Classic for so many years, it only showed the ability to store his understanding. If the ability to store comprehension first appeared, the Hongmeng Enlightenment Classic was at the first level. Now, it is very likely that his Hongmeng Enlightenment Classic has broken through to the second level. Right? Probably. Qin Daoxian thought, the confidence in his heart became more and more sufficient. This Hongmeng Enlightenment Classic is good everywhere, except for one thing, without any explanation. Even if he made a breakthrough, if it wasn't for the fact that these stardusts were no longer fused together, he still couldn't find any changes. In Qin Daoxian's cognition, it was like an inexplicable existence that never explained, but remained firm. Whether it's exactly what I guessed, it depends on tomorrow's situation. Qin Daoxian said silently. The next day, Qin Daoxian recited the Hongmeng Enlightenment Classic again. After a stick of incense, another stardust was added to the sea of consciousness space, and the number of stardust exceeded 10, reaching an unprecedented 11. Sure enough. Seeing this scene, Qin Daoxian breathed a sigh of relief. Can continue to store comprehension, things proved to be very consistent with his guess. That is, the Hongmeng Enlightenment Classic has broken through to a new level. The threshold for epiphany has been raised. There are pros and cons to raising the threshold of epiphany. The downside is that, as a result, there will be fewer epiphanies in the future. In the past, it was a 10-day storage of comprehension, and an epiphany. Now I don't know how long I have to store my comprehension to get an epiphany. But the advantage is definitely that the effect of the epiphany is stronger. Previously, it was only possible to store up to 10 stardust. Within a stick of incense, the comprehension is increased tenfold. Although the effect is strong enough, it is compared to Qin Daoxian's increasingly terrifying Kendo realm. This epiphany effect is no longer as exaggerated as it was at the beginning. Although his Kendo level is still improving with the epiphany once every 10 days, the speed of improvement is definitely not as fast as when he first set foot on Kendo. When Qin Daoxian just practiced wind-chasing sword art, it was a small success with 1 epiphany, and 3 epiphanies. After a few more epiphanies, you will directly reach the state of perfection. This kind of terrifying effect is estimated to scare people who don't know the inside information. But as his kendo level continues to improve, the effect of epiphany is also waning. In fact, it is not that the epiphany effect has weakened. But his kendo realm is advanced, and the difficulty of cultivation is getting more and more difficult. In fact, in the eyes of other swordsmen, the speed of his kendo realm's progress was simply terrifying. The entire Wangxinghai. Who can be like him, when he is only in his 20s, the sword intent has reached the second tangible state. Others who succeed in building a foundation in their 20s will be hailed as geniuses. To be able to become a sword cultivator in his 20s is a genius among geniuses, a monster-like existence. In his 20s, the sword intent has reached a tangible state, and it is not clear whether there will be any newcomers, but he, Chen Daoxian, is absolutely unprecedented. Time passes day by day. Chen Daoxian pressed patience. In addition to polishing the real essence every day, Ji taught the Chen family's blessing immortal seedlings in the clan. The main course he took was Kendo class. Compared with Chen Xianhe, Chen Daoxuan's understanding of Kendo is not known by many levels. He explained the basics of Kendo to all the immortals, and he did not know how much more thorough it was than Chen Xianhe. Down these days, Chen Daoxian actually found a few good seedlings in Kendo in this batch of immortal seedlings. This is the gap between him and Chen Xianhe. Even though Chen Xianhe has cultivated the wind-chasing sword art to the realm, his understanding of wind-chasing sword art is based on a quick word. Not to mention his other insights into Kendo. And Chen Daoxian, whether it is his comprehension of wind-chasing sword art or covering rain sword art, even surpassed those who created these two sword art. With his current Kendo realm, wanting to create this level of sword art is simply a matter of randomness. Those first-order swordsmanships that he thought were incomparably esoteric in the past. Judging from today's eyes, it seems like a child's painting, which is laughable. Soon. 20 days have passed. In front of Lingtan in Lingfu. A stick of incense time. Chen Daoxian silently recited the Hongmeng Enlightenment Classic again. In the sea of consciousness space. 30 stardust exudes faint starlight, constantly revolving around the golden scriptures. This time, Chen Daoxian finally felt the familiar attraction between Xingchen again. See. The corner of Chen Daoxuan's mouth couldn't help but evoke a smile. He no longer controls the stardust, allowing them to smash together. Next second. A sense of shock as if the world had opened up completely drowned Chen Daoxuan's consciousness. If there are outsiders present, you will find 2 lines of tears falling from Chen Daoxuan's eyes. This is the shock and emotion after having a glimpse of the corner. There has never been a moment when Chen Daoxian felt that he was so close to Dao, as if he stretched out his hand and could grab each other. But soon, Chen Daoxuan's consciousness regained clarity. He knew that the feeling just now was just an illusion caused by a sudden increase in understanding. Just like when he first broke through the foundation building stage, he felt that he could pierce the sky with a single sword. Looking at the countless light clusters floating in the sea of consciousness, Chen Daoxian immediately chose to comprehend the Qianyuan Sword Classic. The Qianyuan Sword Sutra, which was still obscure in his eyes before, seems to be as easy as 1 + 1 at this moment. Less than a dozen breaths. He thoroughly understood all the contents of the Qianyuan Sword Sutra during the foundation period. Not only that. On this basis, Chen Daoxian discovered a cultivation method that was more suitable for him. In other words, in just a dozen or so breaths, he discovered a way to improve the Qianyuan Sword Sutra to be more suitable for him. To know. The Qianyuan Sword Section Sect Practice Method Qianyuan Sword Classic has undergone tremendous changes from the original version passed down by Qing Zhenxian after countless generations of talented monks have improved and perfected it. But these changes are the accumulation of the Qianyuan Jianzong monks from generation to generation. It is the crystallization of their wisdom. And now, Chen Daoxian has crystallized the wisdom of countless generations and made improvements and adjustments that suit him in just a dozen breaths. To be able to achieve this level, Qin Daoxian must be required to have an extremely profound understanding of this foundation building period, Qin Yuan Sword Classic, and himself. Replaced with the previous accumulation of 10 Stardust Epiphany once. It is impossible to achieve the present effect. Even if the epiphany time is extended to an hour, it cannot be done. This is the threshold of understanding, and not simple time can make up for. Thinking that there is still a long time before a stick of incense. Qin Daoxian was unwilling to waste it. After all, it was an epiphany opportunity that he had painstakingly accumulated for a month. Think of this. He was once again immersed in another group of light. This light group is loaded with knowledge about the fourth-order mountain protection formation. It was impossible for him to understand this fourth-order formation because of Qin Daoxian's formation skills. But this time, he surprisingly understood. Not ignorant, but really understand, although the speed of understanding is very slow. But he knew the principle of arranging this formation, and even knew how to raise his formation level to the 4th level. Just when he was immersed in it and felt overjoyed, the epiphany came to an abrupt end. This moment, Qin Daoxian felt like he had fallen from the sky to the earth. This feeling was a bit more uncomfortable than before, but fortunately, he had experienced countless epiphanies before, and quickly overcame this sense of loss. After an epiphany, I actually comprehended about 30% of this mountain protection formation, which is simply too unexpected. Qin Daoxian said happily. Originally, he was counting on it, relying on 10 times the epiphany to slowly grind, to see if it took a few years to arrange this formation. If it still doesn't work, then Qin Daoxian could only take the second way. Hua Zhangong invited a 4th-order formation mage to come to Shuanghu Island and Sequoia Island to arrange the formation. It's just that there are too many secrets on Shuanghu Island. If there is no other way, Qin Daoxian does not want outsiders to set foot here. Didn't expect this time. The Hongmeng Enlightenment Classic broke through to the 2nd level, and 10 times the comprehension became 30 times the comprehension. The effect of epiphany increases. The 4th-order formation that used to be a problem is no longer a problem now. Even with his ability of 30 times his comprehension, he will soon be able to become a 4th-order array mage. To become a 4th-order array mage with a foundation-building cultivation, this has never happened in the world of immortals. Look at the Hongmeng Enlightenment Classic in the Sea of Consciousness space. Qin Daoxian secretly said, I don't know what kind of surprises you will give me in the future. Chapter 173. Chongping No. 1 Xiuxian Primary School. Inside the classroom. Standing on the podium, Qin Daoxian looked at the little cultivators of the blessing generation below, with a slight smile on his lips, and said, You all know that the essence of wind-chasing sword art is in a quick word, so how to achieve this quick word, there are who knows, heard. The crowd looked at each other in dismay, and the entire classroom was silent. Teacher, I know. Well, tell me. Qin Daoxian looked at the child who was less than 1.2 meters tall. His name is Qin Fusheng, and he is a fairy seedling with the best kendo talent found by Qin Daoxian among this group of people of the blessed generation. Not only that, this Qin Fusheng also has upper spiritual roots, and is the object that the Qin family plans to focus on training. Seeing him raise his hand, Qin Daoxian's tone softened a bit. Qin Fusheng stood up nervously and said, I think the essence of wind-chasing sword art is not about being fast, but about melting the sword into the wind. Oh. Qin Daoxian's eyes lit up slightly, tell me about it specifically. When our cultivators don't use the sword, the imperial envoy Feijian, they completely rely on infuriating qi to force the flying sword, but in this way, most of the power of the flying sword is damaged in the collision with the air. The principle of chasing the wind sword art is to minimize the collision between the flying sword and the air in the process of mastering the sword, to achieve the ultimate state, and even the sword can be melted into the wind, and the sword can be silent. The more Chen Fusheng spoke, the more confident he became, and the apprehension he had just stood up disappeared without a trace, and the whole person was full of confidence in his statement. Okay. Chen Daoxian nodded. Unexpectedly, there are people in our class who have such a profound understanding of wind-chasing sword art. He paused. Then do you know how to melt the sword into the wind? Heard. Chen Fusheng suddenly showed a bitter face. Obviously. This question is a bit out of line. If you want to touch this step, you must at least cultivate the wind-chasing sword art to the realm of mastery. The group of children in front of them had just taken Tongmai pill to become a first-level chi refining cultivator. Because Chen Fusheng is the key training object of the Chen family, he enjoys core-level training resources. Coupled with his diligent practice, he has already broken through to the second level of chi refining last month. But this younger brother, in the entire second batch of Fuzi generation clansmen, can be counted on one's fingers. Not to mention that someone can cultivate the wind-chasing sword art to the realm of achievement in such a short period of time. To know. Even among the outer disciples of the Qianyuan sword sect, there are only a handful of them who can cultivate the first-order sword art such as wind-chasing sword art to the realm of great achievement within a few years. This kind of person, without exception, has a very high talent for kendo. You can try to cultivate in the direction of sword repair in the future. Once a first-order sword technique is cultivated to the perfect state during the chi refining period, the possibility of comprehending the sword intent when the foundation is established in the future will be as high as 50% or more. See him posing as if scratching his ears and scratching his cheeks. Chen Daoxian smiled and waved his hand, motioning him to sit down. Then he said to the crowd, the essence of wind-chasing sword art, blending the sword into the wind, lies in the subtle manipulation of the true energy attached to the flying sword, everyone. Soon. A kendo class ended in Chen Daoxian's in-depth explanation for everyone. After class, everyone respectfully saluted Chen Daoxian, and then ran towards the dormitory in a hurry. But Chen Daoxian said, Chen Fusheng, you stay. Heard. Chen Fusheng quickly stopped, looked at his little friend, and said, you guys go back first. Okay, goodbye Fusheng, goodbye teacher. Everyone waved to Chen Fusheng and Chen Daoxian and left the classroom. Immediately. Only Chen Daoxian and Chen Fusheng were left in the huge classroom, which seemed a little quiet. A long time. Chen Daoxian was the first to break the silence. I heard from your craftsman teacher, you don't want to take the crafting route? Hearing this sentence, Chen Fusheng lowered his head and tightened his hands slightly. After a while, he raised his head, looked at Chen Daoxian, and said, Teacher, I want to be a sword cultivator, just like you. Done. He looked at Chen Daoxian with burning eyes. Chen Daoxian smiled slightly. Do you know what jianqiu is? Chen Fusheng shook his head blankly. Then you still want to be a sword cultivator? Miss. Chen Fusheng said, and added, I like it. Seeing his eyes drifting to the flying sword that he used to demonstrate in class, Chen Daoxian said, it is just a magic weapon, a sword repairer, it is not as simple as a simple imperial envoy flying sword. This road is much more difficult than becoming an alchemist, a talisman, or even a magician. Maybe you can't set foot on this road with all your life's efforts, even so, are you willing? Hear this. A hint of hesitation flashed in Chen Fusheng's eyes, but then he threw away the hesitation. He nodded heavily towards Chen Daoxian and said, I would like to give it a try, even if I take my path as a bet. Hear such mature words in the mouth of a 5-year-old child. Even though Chen Daoxian knew that children in this world were generally precocious, he was still a little moved. If you want to become a sword cultivator, kendo talent is important, but unswerving belief is also important. Not even inferior to kendo talent. Because even a person with excellent kendo talent will encounter setbacks and stagnate on the road to jianqiu. After a year of stagnation, some people may continue to persevere. 10 years, decades. Perhaps the cultivator of the same age has already entered a higher cultivation level, and you are still struggling in the foundation building stage. This pain and depression cannot be sustained without a firm will. Yang family Tianjiao Yang Gongwan was only one step away from comprehending sword intent, and finally gave up. Even though she was for the family, to a certain extent, she was moved by external things, and her belief was still not firm enough. Looking at Qin Fuxing's young but tall body, Qin Daoxian said solemnly, "Since you have this confidence, as the young patriarch of the Qin family, I will naturally do my best to help you." He paused. "From today onwards, you will come to my house after school every day." Heard. The surprise on Qin Fuxing's face disappeared in a flash. Like an adult, he cupped his hands and said, "Thank you, young patriarch." "Don't be too polite," Qin Daoxian said solemnly, "since you are interested in swordsmanship, from now on, you will focus all your energy on swordsmanship. As for other courses such as weapon refining and alchemy, you can skip it." This. Qin Fuxing couldn't help a little hesitant. He knew that the first batch of the family's children of the blessing character had entered the Feijian factory and the alchemy factory after studying for a year. If there are no accidents, they will enter the two factories after 1 year of study. And he gave up alchemy and tool refining, which meant that he would be completely out of production work, unlike other monks of the blessing generation. From a certain point of view, this is undoubtedly unfair to other people of the Fu family. He hesitated to see him. Qin Daoxian knew what he was thinking, and said, "You can't even overcome this grudge in your heart, and you still want to comprehend the sword intent and become a sword cultivator?" Hearing this, Qin Fuxing suddenly felt cold on his back, bowed and said, "Fuxing is taught. Look at him like this." Qin Daoxian nodded with satisfaction. "Come with me." "Yes, immediately." A flash of light passed by, and the two of them landed in the courtyard where Qin Daoxian usually practiced in a blink of an eye. Feeling the aura in the courtyard far beyond the outside world, Qin Fuxing's little face immediately smiled. "Go back to God." An explosion sounded in his ear, immediately calling his attention back. Qin Fuxing immediately lowered his head. "Where is your seat?" Qin Daoxian stretched out his hand. Qin Fuxing followed Qin Daoxuan's fingers and saw a futon made by Wen Yu, and immediately sat on it cross-legged. "See." Qin Daoxian nodded and sat on another futon not far away, opposite him. "The wind-chasing sword art I taught in class today has several more complicated, but faster ways to practice. Sit cross-legged." Qin Daoxian told Qin Fuxing all kinds of his perceptions of wind-chasing sword art and his perception of kendo. At this time, in Qin Daoxuan's consciousness space, the golden scripture entrenched in the center of the sea of consciousness exudes an inexplicable charm. Under the influence of this charm, Qin Fuxing closed his eyes unconsciously. However, neither Qin Daoxian nor Qin Fuxing himself noticed this strange change. After a stick of incense, Qin Daoxian found that Qin Fuxing seemed to have fallen asleep with his eyes closed, and he was immediately dissatisfied, and his face suddenly turned ashen. "Fuxing!" A loud shout rang in Qin Fuxing's ears. "What?" Qin Fuxing woke up suddenly and looked at Qin Daoxian with a surprised look, feeling a little overwhelmed. Damn it! He actually fell asleep while the young patriarch was preaching, and he slept unconsciously. He secretly complained, "This time, the young patriarch must have a very bad impression of him, and he will not even open a small stove to explain kendo for him in the future." Thinking of this, Qin Fuxing couldn't help but feel depressed. But soon, he found that his sea of consciousness seemed to have one more thing. Consciousness sinks. In a consciousness sea space with only a little light, a stardust floats quietly in the consciousness sea space, embellishing the light in the center of the consciousness sea even more mysteriously. What is this? Qin Fuxing's face was full of horror. As a monk who had just entered the fairyland, he knew the importance of the sea of knowledge. Once there is a mistake in the sea of consciousness, the consequences are often more troublesome than if there is a problem with the sea of qi in Dantian. Think of this. He didn't dare to hide it at all, and immediately told Chen Daoxian the problem of his knowledge of the sea space. You mean, just after you fell asleep, there was a floating stardust in the sea of consciousness space? Chen Fuxing did not notice that when Chen Daoxian said this, his tone trembled slightly. Yes, young patriarch, it's in my consciousness sea space. Chen Fuxing nodded. Come here and let me check. Chen Daoxian beckoned to him. Chen Fuxing walked over without any hesitation, and lowered his young head in front of Chen Daoxian. Chen Daoxian gently placed his palm on top of his head, and then closed his eyes. Soon, he invaded his divine consciousness into the other party's sea of consciousness space. Thanks to Chen Fuxing's cooperation, the process went smoothly without any resistance. Next moment, sure enough, he saw a stardust that was exactly the same as his sea of consciousness in Chen Fuxing's sea of consciousness space. It's just that compared to his star dust, Chen Fuxing's star dust is much bleaker. It should be that Chen Fuxing's comprehension is still far from his. Therefore, the stored comprehension, the embodied stardust, will also dim a lot. However, a person's comprehension will continue to rise with the increase of insight and knowledge, and even the improvement of the cultivation base, and it is not static. There is no phenomenon that the cultivator's understanding does not change after the foundation is established, compared with before the foundation is established. In this regard, understanding and spiritual roots are completely different. How Ling Zhen was born, there is no special means in this life, and it will not change again. And understanding is constantly changing. For example, Chen Daoxian, the perception he has stored now, that is, the star dust in the sea of knowledge, is both bigger and brighter than when he first started. Chapter 175, For 1 month in a row. Chen Daoxian pulled different Chen family members and used various methods to finally arrive at the new function of Hongmeng Enlightenment Classic after breaking through the second layer. Compared to the function of storing perception in the first layer, the Hongmeng Enlightenment Classic has a new ability to break through to the second level. Chen Daoxian temporarily downgraded it and called it preaching. And Chen Daoxian thought at first that the stardust that appeared in Chen Fuxing's sea of consciousness was the difference between the Hongmeng Enlightenment scripture and the storage of each other's perception. Actually, the star dust accumulated in Chen Fuxing's mind is the realization of all kinds of knowledge Chen Daoxian instilled into the other party's sea of consciousness through the preaching function. For example, Chen Daoxian is instilling kendo-related experience and insights into Chen Fuxing. The accumulation of 10 star dusts in Chen Fuxing's sea of knowledge will form an epiphany in kendo practice after they are merged into an explosion. If Chen Daoxian explained to Chen Daochu his experience and insights about the knowledge of artifact refining, the stardust that appeared in Chen Daochu's sea of knowledge accumulated 10 stars and merged into one, there would be an epiphany about artifact refining. But whatever. Since the source of this epiphany is from Chen Daoxian, the final effect of their epiphany will not exceed the level of Chen Daoxian. In fact, it is quite normal to think about it carefully. If there is no such restriction, everyone in the Chen family can have an epiphany like Chen Daoxian, which is simply a terrifying thing. The speed of development of the Chen family is actually very fast. Why Chen Daoxian still feels like he is dragging the Chen family to run? The reason is that his strength is growing faster than the Chen family's power expansion. He is now in the early stage of foundation building, but with his kendo realm with tangible sword intent, his real strength is comparable to that of an ordinary cultivator in the early period of Zifu. Apart from him, the Chen family didn't even have a second foundation building cultivator. There is no need to elaborate on how big the gap is. And in the future, with Chen Daoxuan's Hongmeng Enlightenment Classic breaking through to the second level, the ability to store understanding has skyrocketed, and his progress will be faster in the future. And so, the Chen family will become more of a burden to him. Even though Chen Daoxian was reluctant to give up his clan because of his feelings and commitment, it was an indisputable fact that the Chen family held him back. Why are the Chen family working so hard now? In addition to the honor of the family, there is also the reason why the cultivator of the Qin family does not want to become Qin Daoxuan's burden. At this point, seeing Qin Daochu, Qin Daoyan, and Qin Daochuan working so hard without a single complaint, Qin Daoxian didn't know how. As long as a dignified person, no one wants to be a burden to others, so is the Qin family cultivator. Including the new generation of monks from the Qin family. They can temporarily live under the wings of Qin Daoxian and the family, but they cannot live under the wing of the family forever. Although Qin Daoxian is the head of the Qin family, he is not the nanny of all the Qin family members. He couldn't be everyone's nanny either. If there is a day when all the Qin clan members become babies to be fed, Qin Daoxian will resolutely give up the family even if he is reluctant to give up. Such a family is not what Qin Daoxian, nor every member of the Qin family wants to see. But helpless. Compared with Qin Daoxian, even if the other cultivators of the Qin family tried their best, not only did they fail to keep up with Qin Daoxuan's pace, but they were pulled further and further by Qin Daoxian. Actually, on the first day Qin Daoxian obtained the Hongmeng Enlightenment Classic, he knew in his heart that the most suitable person for this golden finger is not to be a family cultivator, but to be an unrestrained loose cultivator. He can join a certain cultivation force, and he does not need to have too deep feelings for outsiders and that force. Once the force is useless to him, he will resolutely abandon it. If this is the case, Qin Daoxuan's current achievements may be much higher than now. At least, he will not rack his brains for the cultivation resources of his clansmen to think about how to use industrialized production to improve the productivity of magical instruments and medicinal herbs. In order to improve this productivity, he will not waste his precious epiphany opportunity to create all kinds of new instruments. If Qin Daoxian joins a certain practice force, he only needs to invest all the opportunities of epiphany into himself. For example, in Kendo, for example, in the understanding of Kung Fu. As for cultivation resources, as long as he shows superior talent, or learns a method of earning spirit stones, whether it is alchemy or weapon refining, it is enough to guarantee his cultivation resources. And so, his strength is definitely stronger than now, and his troubles are definitely less than now. But he is Qin Daoxian, a cultivator of the Qin family whom Qin Xianhe has been teaching since he was rescued from the monster more than 10 years ago. After so many years, Qin Daoxuan's heart was warmed up bit by Qin Xianhe even if it was made of stone. Whether it was out of Qin Xian's expectations or his own feelings, he could not abandon the family and fly away alone. But the family drag is an indisputable fact. Until today. Qin Daoxian breathed a sigh of relief. He knew that with the preaching function of the Hongmeng Enlightenment Classic, after breaking through the second layer, the cultivator of the Qin family would no longer be his burden, but his help. Qin Daoxuan's Lingfu courtyard. 3 cultivators of the Qin family stood. Among them, the leader is naturally Qin Daoxian himself, and the other 2 are Qin Daochu and Qin Daoyan. At this moment, they all stared at Qin Fusheng, who was sitting cross-legged on the warm jade futon. There is a look of anticipation in his eyes. Soon. A stick of incense. The time has passed. Qin Fusheng slowly opened his eyes, and there was a burst of light in his eyes. Fusheng, how? Qin Daoxian took a deep breath and asked. Qin Fusheng showed a confident smile on his face, nodded and said, "Young patriarch, it's done." Okay. Qin Daoxian was overjoyed, nodded and said, "Try it." Yes, young patriarch. Qin Fusheng stood up and bowed to Qin Daoxian. Immediately cast his wind-chasing sword art after his epiphany. Soon, under his control, the red shadow flying sword turned into a phantom, and what was even more exaggerated was that the chi-chi sound after the red shadow flying sword pierced the air actually disappeared completely. Initially melt the sword into the wind. This is a sign of the completion of the first order wind-chasing sword art. It only took a mere month for Qin Fusheng to achieve it. The speed of kendo progress is no slower than the original Qin Daoxian. Chen Daochu looked at Chen Fusheng with a shocked expression, because in comparison, he had practiced the wind-chasing sword art for so many years, and so far he has not broken through to the realm of great achievement. Although there is a reason why he has been focusing on refining. But what I have to say is that he is a cultivator who is about to build a foundation, and his swordsmanship is actually behind a descendant of the second-level Qi refining. It is really shameful for him to be an elder. However, he quickly adjusted his mood. Because of this period, through Chen Daoxuan's sermons, his craftsmanship level has improved by leaps and bounds, and so far he has broken through to the level of a second-order craftsman. This terrifying speed of progress is extremely rare among the refiners in the entire Wangxinghai. After all, he has not yet reached the foundation building stage, and he has already been able to refine the second-order magic weapon. This makes other refiners think. Thinking of this, he looked at Chen Daoxian, grinned and said, "Young patriarch, you are really the big treasure of my Chen family," heard the words. Chen Daoxian looked at him with a dark face, which made him shiver immediately. Seeing him like this, Chen Daoyan covered her mouth and laughed softly. In the past month, through Chen Daoxuan's sermon, her level of alchemy has also improved rapidly, and she has almost touched the realm of a second-order alchemist. Remember, my Chen family members can achieve this speed of progress without relying on anything, but relying on their own talent, understand? Chen Daoxian said quietly. Heard the words. The hearts of everyone froze. Immediately afterwards, they all thought about what this terrifying ability meant to a cultivation force. Let's not talk about alchemists and artifact refiners, the logistics personnel who are related to the power of cultivation. It is said that the Qin family can batch manufacture a perverted cultivator whose combat power far exceeds that of the same rank, which makes all the cultivation forces unable to calm down. How rare is sword repair? Looking at the millions of cultivators in the entire Guang'an prefecture, only one sword cultivator, Zhou Mubai, could tell. That is no longer a 1-in-million cultivator like Tianlingen cultivator, but the entire mansion, and there is a Tianjiao cultivator like Zhou Mubai. In the entire Zhangzhou, there are not many swordsmen. It is true that other prefectures are not like Zhangzhou, which suffered from the rebellion of God and the Battle of Zhenengguan, which resulted in the destruction of the talented monks in the prefecture. But the genius of Jiangxi's level is also the top genius in other states. Even in Qianyuan Jianzong. Once a cultivator has established a foundation, he can comprehend the meaning of the sword and become a sword cultivator, and he can instantly be ranked among the true lineages of the sect. It is conceivable how much gold is contained in Jianxiu. And such an existence. The Qin family might be able to mass production in the future. If this is known to other cultivation forces, the consequences are really hard to guess. Anyway, it must have a greater impact and the Qin family's industrialized alchemy and alchemy. Because of the industrialization of alchemy and alchemy, the only increase is the logistical background of a force. And this, mass production, sword repair is directly related to the strength of a practice force. Which is more important is self-evident. In the world of practice, affirming strength is the most important thing. After listening to Chen Daoxuan's words, everyone realized the seriousness of this problem, and immediately swore an oath to never reveal the slightest secret. After Chen Daochu made his vow, he looked at Chen Fusheng as if he were looking at a piece of peerless jade. Unexpectedly, among the cultivators of the Qin Jiafu generation, such a kendo genius can be produced, aside. Chen Daoyan echoed, "Yes, God bless you, my Qin family's junior cultivator is finally full of talents, and one generation is stronger than the other. Chen Fusheng is young after all." I couldn't say these heartfelt words as naturally as Chen Daochu and Chen Daoyan, so they had to hold back their face flushed and said, "Fusheng is ashamed, I can't be praised by my uncle and aunt," heard the words. Everyone looked at each other and all laughed. Chapter 176, In the Courtyard. The three bowed their hands to Chen Daoxian and were about to leave. Chen Daoxian stopped Chen Daochu. "See. Chen Daoyan left with Chen Fusheng first. Watch the two leave. Chen Daochu scratched his head and couldn't help but said, "Young patriarch, you left me, do you have any important tasks to give to me?" Talking. Showing an eager expression. Chen Daoxian smiled and said, "I really have an important task for you." After saying that, his face became serious. "I found a problem from the exchanged jade slips of Qianyuan Jianzong." He paused. "Whether it is in the auction house of Guang'an Prefecture or in the exchanged jade slips of Qianyuan Jianzong, the inheritance of offensive instruments is very common, but the inheritance of defensive spirit armor is very rare. You know what that means?" After speaking, he gave Chen Daochu a meaningful look. Chen Daochu didn't understand the meaning of Chen Daoxuan's words, and said dumbly, "I don't know." Chen Daoxian sighed and said, "What do you think is the difference in strength between after you put on the spirit armor and before you didn't wear it?" Heard. Chen Daochu frowned, thought about it carefully, and said, "The difference in strength is huge, it can even be said to be a world of difference." "That's right." Chen Daoxian looked at the scenery outside the courtyard, and said quietly, "Even if I were in the qi refining period, facing a group of qi refining monks wearing spirit armor, I'm afraid I would be defeated and run away. Even now, I am besieged by a group of late-stage foundation building monks with second-order high-grade spirit armor, and there is a risk of being defeated." "How come?" Chen Daochu looked at Chen Daoxian in shock and could hardly believe what he said. In his eyes, Chen Daoxian is a sword cultivator, and his strength is absolutely on the same level. Such a Tianjiao sword cultivator actually said that if a group of cultivators of the same rank were wearing spirit armor, they could pose a threat to him. This obviously had a big impact on Chen Daochu's three views. But immediately he thought that after he was in the first-rank high-grade life spirit armor, with his cultivation level of the 9th level of qi refining, which was close to the great perfection, he was able to withstand the attacks of ordinary monks in the early stage of foundation establishment. Immediately relieved. Compared with the offensive weapons of the flying sword type, the spiritual armor can indeed affect the balance of strength. Therefore, in the exchanged jade slips of Qianyuan Jianzong, there is no inheritance of high-level spirit armor. In fact, Chen Daoxian exchanged jade slips from Qianyuan Jianzong, and he could smell it. Qianyuan Jianzong's policy was to suppress the big family and support loose cultivators. At this point, it is estimated that all the big families in Wan Xinghai can see it. This is also the reason why the major families under the rule of Qianyuan Jianzong did not dare to make mistakes at will. The core strategic technology such as high-level spirit armor refining and inheritance, once spread to the big family, will enhance the strength of the family in a very short period of time. A group of monks wearing spirit armor and a group of naked monks holding offensive magic weapons are not the same concept at all. Even if Qianyuan Jianzong is not afraid of this kind of power, the expansion of the power of the big family is too great, and it is always a trouble for it. This kind of trouble, Qianyuan Jianzong had to guard against it. Of course. Although spirit armor is good, the price is also quite impressive. Generally, even the most elite children of large families are qualified to wear spirit armor. Just like the Zhou family and the Wu family. Only the most elite family members have spirit armor. But even the Zhou and Wu families have the highest spiritual armor inheritance, only the second-rank top grade. Does the Zhou family have no spiritual stone or lack of military exploits? Of course not. This is the reason why Qianyuan Jianzong intends to control the refining technology of spirit armor. Not only the spirit armor refining technology, but also the warlike instruments such as the Lingshu battleship, the Qianyuan sword sect is strictly controlling. The Zhou family's Lingshu battleship was rewarded by the previous suzerain after the Zhou family made great contributions to the Qianyuan Jianzong's unification of the Wangxinghai. But after that, there is no family in Wan Xinghai that has obtained a refining method for a weapon of war similar to the Spirit Void battleship. Even the Zhou family has only accumulated less than 100 Spirit Void battleships in the past 1,000 years. You can see the preciousness of this weapon of war. The weapon of war may not have obvious effect when dealing with a single monk, but on the vast battlefield, it is like a godlike existence. For example, Izumo Frontline. Xianqing Dao League used a lot of puppet beast cannon fodder to consume one Xinghai cultivator. Facing this kind of cannon fodder, the weapon of war is the best weapon to clear the field. Even now in the war between Guang'an Mansion and Lotus Island Corpse Tide, the Sun brothers did not choose to attack the 4 city gates on a large scale, except for the threat of Zhou Mubai, a perverted sword cultivator. The Zhou family's Spirit Void battleship is also the reason for their fear. This weapon of war, once displayed on a large-scale battlefield, will have a sweeping effect. In addition to the cultivator's quick escape and flexible movement, it is not easy to be locked by this kind of warfare weapon. Others, like the puppet beasts in the Hall of Thousand Machines, and the corpse tide that erupted in Guang'an Mansion, once assembled on a large scale, are simply the living targets of this weapon of war. Therefore, there will be no specific refining inheritance for this kind of war artifact. Of course, for specific instruments, Qianyuan Jianzong is still willing to exchange military exploits, but there are also restrictions. But for loose cultivators, there are no restrictions. Loose cultivators are alone, whether they are exchanging spirit armor or exchanging weapons of war, they generally only exchange one piece. There are no restrictions on this exchange. Qianyuan Jianzong's move restricted the power of big families such as the Zhou family and the Yi family. In the exchange inheritance of Qianyuan sword sect, things that can really increase the family heritage, especially the big family heritage, are generally not available. The inheritance of high-level spirit armor is impressively listed. The inheritance of large-scale war artifacts is also among them. This kind of thing, which is related to the background of a cultivation force, is much stricter than the exchange of exercises. Chen Daoxian rummaged through all the artifact refining inheritances. It also found a refining inheritance of the second-order spirit armor, and the required combat skills are extremely high. Anyway, the military exploits in the hands of the Chen family are simply not enough to exchange. In the courtyard. After Chen Daochu heard Chen Daoxuan's explanation, he immediately understood that the young patriarch's plan was far-reaching. He nodded. After my Chen family cultivators have built a large number of foundations, the current first-order spirit armor will naturally be unable to keep up with the cultivation. Although many foundation-building cultivators do not even have first-order spiritual armor, it does not prevent the Chen family foundation-building cultivators from disliking first-order spiritual armor. That's the truth. Chen Daoxian nodded. Now there are more and more cultivators in my Chen family. In the future, in addition to most people who will enter the factory and put into production work, the military department I planned for the Chen family will definitely start to form. He paused. In my vision, the Chen family cultivators and the military cultivators will be completely separated from the cultivators in charge of production in the future. The monks in the military have only one goal, and do everything possible to improve their own strength to protect the safety of the family. You also know that the components of a cultivator's strength, in addition to his own cultivation, spells, swordsmanship and other realms, are also affected by foreign objects such as instruments. And the impact is huge, heard. Chen Daochu nodded. As an artifact refiner, he couldn't be more clear about this truth. The two monks with the same cultivation base and little difference in spells and other means, the magical weapon can even be said to be the only factor that affects the outcome of the battle between the two. Among them, Lingjia is the most influential factor. Of the two cultivators in the late stage of qi refining, if one's kendo realm has reached the perfection of the first-order sword art, the other is only at the normal Deshang level, but he has a first-order high-grade spirit armor. The outcome of the battle is self-evident. It must be a qi refining cultivator with a first-order high-grade spirit armor. Because the cultivators in the late stage of qi refining who have reached the perfection of the first-order sword art, have no ability to even break the same cultivation level, but have the ability to defend the cultivator with spirit armor. How can there be any suspense in such a battle? Although the cultivator has reached a higher level, the situation is different. But there is no doubt that the increase in the strength of the cultivator by the spirit armor is too terrifying. It can be said to be the best of all types of instruments. Such inheritance, it is no wonder that Qianyuan Jianzong will deliberately limit it. If there are no restrictions, with the financial resources of the various big families in Wan Xinghai, all the elite cultivators in the family can wear high-level spirit armor in minutes. At that time, the strength of the big families will increase terribly. Moreover, compared with a pile of loose cultivators, it is easier for large families to form alliances, which is easy to threaten the rule of Qianyuan Jianzong. This point, as long as the high-level minds of Qianyuan Jianzong are a little sober, they will not be caught off guard. So, I want to set up a magic weapon research institute now, which is responsible for the research of various magic tools. The Institute of Magical Instruments? Chen Daochu was not surprised by the new term in the mouth of the young patriarch, but he was a little curious about the difference between the so-called Magic Weapon Research Institute and the Magic Weapon Factory. Hear Chen Daochu's question. Chen Daoxian explained, of course there are differences. You should know that I created two magical instruments, the melting furnace and the centrifugal wall breaker, right? Chen Daochu nodded. In the future, your Magical Instrument Research Institute will do this job full-time to research new types, especially the special magic instruments that my Chen family needs. What? Hearing this, Chen Daochu's mouth widened in surprise. He is only a second-order weapon refiner, but Chen Daoxian asked him to create a new type of magic weapon. He really wanted to say, young patriarch, you are too embarrassing for me. But seeing Chen Daoxuan's serious eyes, he couldn't say these words at all. Seeing his expression, Chen Daoxian, who had brought him up almost from a young age, didn't know what he was thinking. Immediately, he said in a bad mood, you forgot, your current artifact refining talent is not the same as before. The artifact refining talent has improved so much, don't you have any confidence? How can I? Before Chen Daochu finished speaking, he immediately thought of something, and his face suddenly became sullen. Immediately, he was excited and said incoherently, this is feasible. This is feasible. If the number of talented wizards like me is a little more, this Magic Weapon Research Institute can completely come out. Seeing his brazen boasting like this, Chen Daoxian couldn't even look directly at him. Okay, don't talk nonsense, you have always been leading the magic weapon class, and you have selected a group of steadfast and reliable monks with a certain talent for refining weapons. Now I will build the team of this Magical Instrument Research Institute for me. All right. Chen Daochu nodded hurriedly. Chapter 177. The sky above the immortal city of Guang'an Prefecture. A spirit void battleship rumbled across the sky and landed in the Zhou family station. Below. A group of Zhou Family Foundation establishment cultivators are waiting here. Friend Chen has worked hard all the way. A Zhou Family Foundation building cultivator, who was headed by him, cupped his hands towards Chen Daochuan, who flew down from the spirit void battleship, and said with a smile. Senior Zhou is very polite. Chen Daochuan, who had a black short and fine beard at the corner of his mouth, cupped his hands towards the other side and smiled. Seeing the Zhou family cultivator looking at the spirit void battleship behind him from time to time, Chen Daochuan immediately introduced, thanks to the supply of raw materials from Guang'an Prefecture Xiancheng and Lingtian Xiancheng, the number of medicinal pills and magical instruments refined by our Zhou family this month is very high. It has increased again, Senior Zhou, please take a look. Talking. Chen Daochuan directed the other party to check the goods delivered from the Lingshu battleship. Under the guidance of Chen Daochuan, the Zhou family cultivator checked the medicinal pills and magic tools that the Chen family supplied to the front line every month. Following the inspection, the Zhou family foundation establishment cultivator kept nodding his head. Yes, the amount of medicinal pills this month has increased a lot compared to the previous month. It seems that the number of alchemists in your Chen family has increased again. Saying that, the Zhou family cultivator showed a complicated look in his eyes. Senior is too famous. My Chen family also invested all the spiritual stones they earned into training new alchemists. Not only that, but also spent a lot of spiritual stones in the family's inventory. You know, to train an alchemist and a refiner, the initial cost is too high. Chen Daochuan sighed. Yes. Hearing this, the Zhou family cultivator nodded in agreement. Immediately, he looked at Chen Daochuan with a smile, and said, "But your Chen family is really courageous, and you dare to train alchemists and artifact alchemists at all costs. It seems that in the future Guangganfu medicine market, your Chen family should be yours. Got a seat?" Don't dare, don't dare. Chen Daochuan waved his hands again and again. Our Chen family is also tossing around in this place in Guang'an Mansion, which is comparable to your Zhou family's reputation in the entire Cangzhou medicine pill market. Ha 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 ha. This flattery obviously hit the other side's heart, making the Zhou family cultivator laugh out loud. Between the two talking, the monks under his hands have already counted all the goods. A cultivator in the early stage of foundation building stepped forward and reported to the Zhou family deacon headed by him. Reporting to the deacon, there are 3 types of first-order low-grade elixir brought by the Chen family this time. Among them, there are 143,000 Jiedu pills, 100,000 Posha pills, and 94,500 Huiqi pills, for a total of 337,500 pills. There are also 5,000 first-order low-grade flying swords and 2,400 first-order middle-grade flying swords. The above goods have a total value of 3,865,000 spirit stones. Hearing this report, the Zhou family deacon nodded, indicating that he knew. How about it, fellow Daoist Chen, still follow the previous payment method? Yes, half of it is settled by military merit. Chen Daochuan cupped his hands and laughed. Tisk, Zhou family deacon shook his head, his eyes full of envy. This time, although your Chen family is in the back, you have really gained a lot of military exploits. Fortunately, it can't compare to Senior Zhou Mubai. It is said that a few days ago, Senior Zhou Mubai led the monks in the East Defense Zone to break through a second-order Yin vein transformed by the Corpse Group on Lotus Island, killing nearly 1 million zombies. Dao Yu Chen is really well informed. There is this matter. Deacon Zhou said this, his face was full of uncontrollable joy. The successive victories in the East Defense Zone meant that the rear of Guang'an Prefecture became more and more stable. To know. The East Defense Zone is only a part of the entire Guang'an Prefecture coalition, not even half of it. In the rear of Guang'an Prefecture, 4 defense zones were also set up. Except for the weakest western defense area, the other defense areas are not weak. If every defense area is full of soldiers, at least 1 million monks can be assembled. Coupled with the Zifu cultivators who sit in each defense area, they are a very powerful reserve force. As for the sneak attack by the Lotus Island Corpse Group, it is even more impossible. At this moment, they are being defeated by the coalition forces in the East Defense Zone, and they can't even protect themselves. How can they have the strength to split up and attack the rear of Guang'an Mansion? Besides, the rear of Guang'an Mansion is not a soft persimmon. By doing so, they will only die faster. With Sun Fu's shrewdness, he would definitely not make such a stupid decision. Sequoia Island, Guanhai Xiancheng. Above the city wall, Qin Daoxian and Qin Xianhe stood side by side. Uncle 13, how is it? Looking at the fourth order formation that he arranged with his own hands, Qin Daoxian said proudly. Not bad. Qin Xianhe couldn't help but nodded. If only I could arrange a formation like this from the spiritual veins of the Qin family herd. Qin Daoxian frowned slightly, then shook his head and said, it is not difficult to arrange the fourth order formation, but the difficulty is how to bring out the power of this fourth order formation. Guanhai Xiancheng has a third-order spiritual vein as its power source, and my Qin family's spiritual vein is only second-order, and it is difficult to meet the requirements of arranging a fourth-order array. Wait a few more months, until my Qin family has accumulated 10 million spirit stones, and after promoting the spirit veins to the third order, it will not be too late to set up the fourth order mountain protection formation. Speaking of this, Qin Daoxian laughed. Once the fourth order mountain protection formation is arranged, my Qin family will have the foundation of a big family. You must know that the fourth order mountain protection formation can resist even a Jindan cultivator. If the person guarding the formation has the Zifu cultivation base, he can completely block the attack of a Jindan cultivator. Hear this. Qin Xianhe couldn't help feeling filled with emotion. Once upon a time, the Qin family didn't even have a single spiritual vein, and even spending 500 spirit stones to buy a Tongmai pill had to think twice. And now, he and Qin Daoxian are actually discussing the promotion of the third-order spiritual veins in this open-minded discussion. Really, all the time. By the way, in order to build this immortal city, it cost you nearly 60 million spirit stones. I heard that the military salaries in the Western Defense Zone are about to be dispersed. Do you need your family to help you make up for this part of the spirit stones? Qin Xianhe turned his head, looked at Qin Daoxian, and asked. Hearing this, Qin Daoxian turned to look at the increasingly prosperous Guanhai Xiancheng, smiled slightly, shook his head and said, "No need, Uncle 13, just watch it." Although I don't know what the Qin Daoxian is up to. But Qin Xianhe, who knew him well, knew that whenever Qin Daoxian showed such an expression, the problems encountered by the Qin family would be solved easily. I believe this time will be no exception. Guanhai Xiancheng, as the third large immortal city built by Guang'an Prefecture, is different from the square city built by other foundation building families. First, it was built on a third-order spiritual vein worth over 10 million spiritual stones. Secondly, the blocks, lingfu, shops, roads and other buildings in Xiancheng were all carefully designed by a Yang family construction master who was responsible for building Lingrui city. No way. Although Qin Beiwang of the Qin family is a senior general, he is a mortal who has no experience in building immortal cities. Not to mention other issues. Just because Qin Beiwang didn't understand the shortcoming of the formation method completely disqualified him from building the fairy city. After all, immortal cities are different from mortal cities. There are all kinds of monks living in it, so the requirements for the formation of its internal buildings are very high. For example, in an inn, it is necessary to arrange various formations that sound insulation and prevent the mutual interference of aura. Stores in Xiancheng should also arrange various alarm formations to prevent people from making trouble in the store. Merchants can even invite law enforcement members of the family in charge to preside over justice for them. Besides, like some kind of spiritual palace that supplies monks to practice, the forbidden air formation that makes monks forbid flying in the air. All need to build arrays. You must know that the arrangement of the formation is not empty-handed, and it can be done by drawing a few circles against the air. To arrange it, you need a lot of array materials. The fourth-order mountain protection formation arranged by Qin Daoxian is like this, and the various buildings in Guanhaixin City are still like this. The price of 1 or 2 copies of these array materials may not be high, but if you add it up, the price of a whole immortal city is a bit jaw-dropping. According to Qin Daoxian's plan, this fairy city is far from finished. 1/10 of the space reserved inside has just been used up. When the reserved space is fully built, it is estimated that the current population of monks in the West Defense Zone will be far from being filled. Although the Western Defense Area is also one of the 5 defense areas, except for those cultivators who were too close to Sequoia Island, except for the original clan and the dojo. The other monks were more willing to run to the immortal city of Guang'an Prefecture and immortal city of Lingri. After all, in those places, there are cultivators of Zifu. Although the cultivators of Guang'an Mansion knew that the sword was powerful, in their eyes, the sword cultivators of the foundation building period were far less powerful than the cultivators of Z Mansion. In addition, the front line of the East Defense Zone is now victorious. The cloud over everyone's heads gradually dissipated. Naturally, there is no reason for everyone to run to the backward Guanhai Xiancheng. As a result, in addition to the 100,000 soldiers who were stationed in the army, Guanhai Xianqing also had less than 300,000 scattered cultivators and family cultivators stationed here. Compared with the gathering of millions of monks in the Guang'an prefecture's sphere of influence, and the gathering of more than 1 million monks in Lingde Immortal City, there is a far cry. Even in the Qingguan station in the southern defense area, there are more scattered repairers gathered than those in the western defense area. For this phenomenon, Qin Daoxian was not discouraged either. He knows that all treatment comes from strength. Neither the Qin family nor his Qin Daoxian have given the enemy such confidence. Naturally, they didn't dare to drag their families along and put all their bets on the coalition forces in the western defense zone. Return to the west defense station. Just entered the main hall of the headquarters. A cultivator in spirit armor walked in with strides like the wind. Seeing Qin Daoxian, the cultivator's eyes lit up, and he cupped his hands and said, "Master Commander, this month's military salary should be paid." Done. Quite nervously, he glanced at Qin Daoxian. Qin Daoxian wants to build a fairy city on Sequoia Island. Many monks in the coalition forces in the western defense zone were opposed to it. It's just that as Qin Daoxuan's subordinates, they cannot disobey Qin Daoxuan's orders. At the moment, the problem that the group of monks worried about at the beginning finally happened. The coalition forces in the western defense zone have begun to fail to pay the soldiers of the coalition army. Chapter 178. Since the Western Defense Zone coalition forces garrison Sequoia Island, it's like running out of money. If it wasn't for Zhou Mingho, the commander of the Guang'an Prefecture's coalition forces, in order to win over Qin Daoxian, and the Qin family actually provided strong logistical support for the front line of the East Defense Zone. In other words, other people dared to embezzle the military expenditure of the Western Defense Zone so arbitrarily. It has long been captured by the Guang'an Prefecture Allied Forces for corruption and dereliction of duty. Since the garrison of Sequoia Island in the West Defense Zone, not only has a third-order spiritual vein been built, but also more than a dozen second-order spiritual veins have been built on a dozen nearby islands with Sequoia Island as the core, imitating the Zhou family in Guang'an Prefecture Xianmeng. The pulses are used for loose cultivators and other small families, and is responsible for the patrolling and stopping of the Lingshu battleship. The cost of constructing the spiritual veins alone is as high as more than 20 million spiritual stones. And the huge order for magical instruments from the Qin family cost millions of spirit stones. Afterwards, the construction of Guanhai Xianqing cost a lot of the military expenditure of the Western Defense Zone, and nearly 50 million spirit stones were spent. Arguably, the Guanhai Xianqing built with this money should be owned by the Western Defense Zone Coalition Army, but anyone with a discerning eye can see it. However, the Qin family assigned its taxation rights to the name of their own family. This is the blatant private use of military spending. Private use of military expenses is not enough. The point is that after spending like this, there is not much left of the original 80 million spirit stone military expenses. Don't talk about doing other things, even paying the soldiers' salaries is a little powerless. Inside the main hall of the headquarters of the West Defense District, Qin Daoxian looked at Lei Zhen, who was standing in front of him with a nervous face, and said with a smile, "Why are you so nervous?" "My Qin family is on Shuanghu Island, a few hundred miles away from Sequoia Island. Are you still worried that my Qin family can't escape?" He shook his head. "Don't worry. This month's military pay, I will pay it out truthfully." After finishing speaking, he waved towards Lei Zhen. When Lei Zhen heard the words, he glanced at his immediate boss with a slight hesitation, and then he cupped his hands and slowly exited the hall. Watching Lei Zhen leave the hall, Qin Daoxian murmured, "After all, Daochuan should be back soon." Young Patriarch. A spirit void battleship descended from the sky. Qin Daochu flew down from the spirit void battleship and immediately bowed his hands when he saw Qin Daoxian. Qin Daoxian looked at Qin Daochuan, who had grown into a grown-up appearance, and couldn't help feeling filled with emotion. At the age of 14, Qin Daochuan was taken by Qin Xianhe to the Feijian shop in Guang'an Prefecture to exercise, and then he took over the business of magic tools in Sangxiafang City in Guang'an Prefecture. By now, Qin Daochuan is already 20 years old. It can be said that Qin Daoxian watched him grow up in front of him little by little. At this moment, seeing the beard growing at the corner of his mouth, he couldn't help feeling emotional. The cultivator of the Qin family's Daoist generation has finally grown up. Not only that, Qin Daochuan also has Zhongling roots, and under the constant cultivation of the Qin family over the years, he has finally reached the 9th level of qi refining. At this rate, it can be as fast as 2 or 3 years, and as slow as 10 years. Qin Daochuan can successfully establish a foundation at the age of 30 at the latest and become a foundation-building cultivator. Patting Qin Daochuan's shoulder heavily, Qin Daoxian said with emotion, "It's hard work." Qin Daochuan looked at Qin Daoxian and shook his head with a silent smile. "Come on, let's go in and talk." "Yes, young patriarch." Qin Daochuan cupped his hands and followed Qin Daoxian into the hall. The two sat in separate positions, and Qin Daoxian personally brewed a pot of spiritual tea for him, and the two drank and chatted. About half an hour. Qin Daochuan finally understood why Qin Daoxian transferred him back to Guanhai City Xiancheng. Compared with the magic instrument market in Sangxiafang City in Xiancheng, Guang'an Prefecture, what the Qin family did in Guanhai Xiancheng was really related to the foundation of the Qin family's future. But, what about the Feijian shop in Sangxiafang City, Guang'an Prefecture? Qin Daochuan frowned and looked at Qin Daoxian. Over the years, the Hongyin Feijian store in Sangxiafang City, Guang'an Prefecture, has long been more than 2 stores. According to Qin Daochuan, the Qin family now has a total of 6 stores in Sangxiafang City, Guang'an Prefecture. It completely covers the major blocks of the entire Sangxiafang City. The types of flying swords in the Hongyin Feijian store have also changed a lot from the beginning. In the past, the Hongyin Feijian store almost only sold the Red Shadow Feijian, a first-order low-grade Feijian. But now, the Hongyin Feijia store not only sells first-order low-grade flying swords, but also the types of first-order low-grade flying swords are no longer limited to the Red Shadow flying sword. Moreover, there are also first-order mid-grade and even first-grade high-grade flying swords for sale. Of course, there are very few people who can afford a first-order high-grade flying sword in the qi refining period. In addition, even if they had 500 spirit stones in their pockets, they mostly wanted to rent a better cave or buy spirit pills. Instead of choosing to change the magic weapon from the first-order low-grade or the first-grade middle-grade to the first-grade high-grade. This is too extravagant for a loose cultivator in the qi refining period. Indulge for a moment. Qin Daoxian raised his head and said, "Now, who is in charge of the Feijian shop in Sangxiafang City, Guang'an Prefecture, besides you?" "Senior Wei Sihai Wei." "It's him." Qin Daoxian nodded. He still remembered the stall owner he met when he first went to the immortal city of Guang'an Mansion. The last time he was in the Hongyin Feijian shop, he also met each other. Unexpectedly, he has now become the second-in-command of the Hongyin Feijian shop in Sangxiafang City, Guang'an Prefecture. But it's normal to think about it. When Wei Sihai joined the Hongyin Feijian store, the Hongyin Feijian store opened its first branch not long ago, and there were only 2 people in the store, Qin Xianhe and Qin Daochuan. Now the Qin family has opened 6 branches in Guang'an Prefecture. Of course, the status has risen, and it has become a veteran. Qin Daoxian nodded. "In your opinion, how does Wei Sihai behave, herd?" Qin Daochuan's heart froze slightly, and he tasted the connotation of Qin Daochuan's words. Qin Daoxian wanted a Wei Sihai to take over the Qin family's business of instruments in Sangxiafang City, Guang'an Prefecture. Senior Wei is calm and low-key, more credible, but Qin Daochuan expressed his concerns. "To be frank, This kind of behavior of completely letting outsiders take over the family business is very rare in the entire Wanxinghai. Because family monks generally cannot lack manpower, they may hire outsiders to help them, but they will never leave the entire business in a fairy city to outsiders. What if Wei Sihai ran away with the money? What if he tried to raise the price of flying swords and corrupt them? There will be many problems here. But compared to these small problems, Chen Daoxian saw further. Here Chen Daochuan's concerns. He explained, the Hengyin Feijian store was indeed the mainstay of my Chen family's income, but now, it is no longer. Whether it's the medicine business between us and the Guang'an Prefecture allied forces, or the magic weapon business, it far exceeds the turnover of the Hengyin Feijian store. Chen Daoxian paused. Besides, the most important foundation of my Chen family now is Guanhai Xiancheng. Only when this Xiancheng is managed well can my Chen family truly possess the heritage of a big family. Compared with doing business in someone else's fairy city, how can there be a lot to gain from operating a fairy city exclusively by yourself? As long as the Chen family makes the operation of Guanhai Xiancheng prosperous, they don't say anything. The taxation of this Xiancheng is enough to make the Chen family fat. Why is the Zhou family so rich? It is not only the various industries of the Zhou family, but more importantly, they owned a huge immortal city that was among the best in the entire Cangzhou before that, the immortal city of Guang'an. The Guang'an Immortal Alliance built the Lingde Immortal City, and it was the Yang family and other Guang'an families who saw that the largest part of Guang'an's interests was monopolized by the Zhou family, and they were unwilling to form this alliance. Since Guang'an Xianmeng can do this, why can't his Chen family do it? If there is no corpse tied on Lotus Island, Chen Daoxian really dare not make this decision so quickly. But now that the corpse tide broke out on Lotus Island, in order to ensure the internal stability of Guang'an Mansion, the Zhou family agreed to compromise and sell some of their interests to the outside world. The so-called division of the 5 defense zones is not as good as the division of Guang'an Prefecture's interests. The west defense area of Guang'an Prefecture will be the sphere of influence of the Chen family in the future. His Chen family built a new immortal city on their own site, why not? Of course, building an immortal city is one thing, and whether it can be developed or not is another. The Lingde Immortal City started well, and that was also Yang Lingyuan's pioneering approach to surrounding this immortal city, opening up spiritual fields and planting spiritual veins for scattered cultivators to build. But soon, this move was imitated by the Zhou family. Now it is imitated by Chen Daoxian. In this regard, his Chen family does not have any advantages at all, but because of latecomers, they are behind others. Moreover, because of the construction of Guanhai Xiancheng, the Chen family encountered the same predicament as the Guang'an Xianmeng, and lacked liquidity. That is, the problem of insufficient spiritual stones. You must know that he has not vigorously supported the scattered cultivators to open up spiritual fields and plant spiritual medicines on the more than 10 second-order spiritual veins opened up by his Chen family. If so, he needs to prepare a larger amount of spiritual stones for circulation. Just do it. Letting Daoist Wei to manage my Chen family's flying sword industry in Sangxiafang City, Guang'an Prefecture, will be an attempt on the road of my Chen family's future development. My Chen family is still young in the Fu character generation, and there are not enough Taoist cultivators. Only by boldly using outsiders can it be in line with the rapid development of my Chen family. Chen Daoxian analyzed slowly, as for the problems of fleeing with money and corruption that you are worried about, as long as an incentive compensation system and a strict financial management system are established, this situation can be avoided. Of course, we always know people who are not aware of people and misunderstand, but this loss is completely within the acceptable range for my Chen family. Even, our Chen family can promise that in the future, for these active monks who have served my Chen family for a certain number of years, my Chen family can help him open up a new immortal family as a way of my Chen family's vassal family. Hearing this, Chen Daochuan's eyes lit up. If you talk about what the biggest wish of a loose cultivator is, the first one must be attaining the Tao and becoming an immortal. Only Whether it's a sect family cultivator or a loose cultivator, they all know in their hearts that no one in this world has ascended to the upper world for hundreds of thousands of years. The saying of becoming an immortal has almost become a phantom legend. At least for loose cultivators, it is an untouchable dream. And helping them create a cultivating family, becoming the ancestor of the family, watching their descendants spread, this can be said to be the most tempting thing for a loose cultivator who has no hope of immortality. But unfortunately, most of the loose cultivators do not have this opportunity and capital. To create a family of cultivating immortals, even the weakest chi-refining family, a wealthy partner and a lawful land, are indispensable. How can an ordinary loose cultivator have so much savings? Loose cultivators who can open up a family of cultivators, without exception, are local tyrants in the cultivators. Now the big clan, in Gwangan Prefecture like the Qin family is willing to help the loose cultivator to open up a cultivator family, and even willing to accept their family as a younger brother. This is a great good thing for the loose cultivator. It works. It works. Qin Daochuan's eyes lit up, and he kept nodding. If it is conditional on helping the loose cultivator to open up the immortal family in the future, I believe that no loose cultivator can refuse this temptation, and will definitely do his best to serve my Qin family. Chapter 179. Finished talking about the magic weapon shop in Sangxiafang City, Guang'an Prefecture. Qin Daoxian turned back to the topic again. He instructed, Dao Chuan, the currency that our Qin family is going to issue in Guanhai Xianqing has far-reaching significance, and we must not take a wrong step, otherwise, for my Qin family, it will be doomed. I heard Qin Daoxian take the matter so seriously. Qin Daochuan nodded solemnly and said, Young Patriarch, you can rest assured that I will take good care of the Changping Central Bank you mentioned, and there will be no accidents. Despite Qin Daochuan's assurance, Qin Daoxian knew in his heart that Qin Daochuan knew nothing about the bank's operating mechanism, and he had to be on the sidelines at all times. In fact, Qin Daoxian was deeply touched when he used spirit stones back then, and it was really inconvenient to use spirit stones as currency. Fortunately, the loose cultivator still has a storage bag, and the loose cultivator is shy in his pocket. Usually, he does not have many spiritual stones in his body. But many family monks probably have this kind of painful experience. For example, the 80 million spirit stones allocated by the Guang'an Prefecture Allied Forces to the Western Defense Region Allied Forces used 10 spirit void battleships to transport them. 80 million spiritual stones, if piled on the ground, would be as high as a hill. There is no storage bag in the world that can hold so many spirit stones. In fact, from that time on, Qin Daoxian had the idea of replacing the spirit stone with a currency. It's just that the Qin family was weak at that time. The sphere of influence is limited to the land of Shuanghu Island, and there are only 11 cultivators in the clan. If you want to talk about the use of spirit stone coins to replace spirit stones for trading and circulation, let alone outsiders laughing, the cultivator of the Qin family probably wanted to laugh when he heard it. Qin Daoxian knows that the issuance of a currency is definitely not a simple matter. First, the currency has to be collateralized. In the past, the issuance of currency was initially based on gold as collateral, that is, the gold standard system. This system is divided into 3 stages, or 3 forms: gold coin, gold bullion standard, and gold exchange standard. Even the US dollar, the world currency in the previous life, was the gold standard used for a long time. But later, with the continuous development of productive forces and materials, the gold standard monetary system has been unable to adapt to the rapid development of productive forces. The performance is that there are too many products being produced and too little gold to issue enough money. If a huge amount of excess currency is issued, in order to adapt to the development of productivity. But in this way, it will inevitably face the risk of gold acceptance. That is, a bunch of people holding money and wanting to accept gold will find that there is no gold to accept. This is undoubtedly an extremely dangerous thing, which will cause a devastating blow to the credit of the currency. The development of society to this stage also means that the gold standard monetary system gradually declines. In modern society, the issuance of currency is no longer collateralized by some kind of physical object, but has become a collateral of nothingness, that is, national credit. Of course, if the Qin family uses the family credit as collateral to issue a currency, it is estimated that they will be spat on by colleagues in Guang'an. Qin Daoxian still has this point. Since credit cannot be used as the collateral for currency issuance, the only choice is to use the spirit stone itself, which everyone agrees with, as the acceptance. Even so, in order for the loose cultivators and family cultivators in Guanhai Xianqing to accept such a currency, Qin Daoxian had to make adequate preparations. Except for currency acceptances. Another difficulty is the currency itself. In the past, most countries issue paper currency. According to the different anti-counterfeiting measures of each country, the quality of the currency produced is also different. Some currencies have excellent anti-counterfeiting measures and are difficult to counterfeit. And some currencies, just call a printing and dyeing factory, can do better. The currency issued by the Qin family must have the characteristics of being difficult to counterfeit and easy to issue. This is not a simple matter. In other words, these two requirements are somewhat contradictory. Difficult to counterfeit means that the currency is difficult to counterfeit and easy to issue, which means that the production speed is fast. To solve this contradiction, we must have superb coinage technology. And this problem. It was the first task that Qin Daoxian handed over to the Institute of Magical Instruments established by Qin Daochu. Twin Lakes Island. A ray of light crossed the sky and landed in the spiritual veins of Shuanghu Island. In front of you. A unique building appeared in front of Zakhen Daochuan. On the plaque of the building, the characters, Chongping Dharma Instrument Research Institute, are written. Qin Daochuan and the others are basically immune to the endless new names of the young patriarch. Or not immune. But the education Qin Daochu and Qin Daochuan received since they were children is the Enlightenment education Qin Daoxian gave them. These new terms, they have been exposed to since childhood. On the contrary, when I grew up and saw those completely different names in the outside world, I felt a little weird. At this point. This is especially true of the people of the Fu family who have received this kind of education since childhood. To some extent, their vision is closer to that of Qin Daoxuan's children in previous lives. That's it. Qin Daoxian smiled at Qin Daochuan. Let's go. Young patriarch, please. Qin Daochuan made a please gesture. Qin Daoxian nodded, raised his legs and walked towards the interior of the Magical Instrument Research Institute, followed by Qin Daochuan. The exterior construction style of Chongping Dharma Instrument Research Institute is quite ancient. It is very similar in structure to the traditional Xianjia Palace in Wanxinghai, but the interior is completely different. It was divided into small laboratories by Qin Daochu. That's right, it's the kind of laboratory that Qin Daoxian built in Qitong Mountain back then. Only, the laboratory of the Chongping Institute of Magical Instruments is almost empty. Come to think of it, at the age of Qin Jiafa's cultivator and his level of refining, he still does not have the ability to run a laboratory by himself. Even though their crafting talent was blessed by Qin Daoxuan's preaching. Nowadays, in addition to Qin Daoxian, Qin Daochu is the only one in the Qin family. With the blessing of Qin Daoxuan's preaching, he barely has the understanding and ability to create a new type of magic weapon. Good boy. Well done. As soon as he walked into the laboratory, Qin Daoxian heard Qin Daochu's excited praise. What's the matter? Why are you so happy? Young patriarch? Hearing this voice, Qin Daochu turned his head and saw Qin Daoxian and Qin Daochuan walking in one after the other. Daochuan, when did you come back? Seeing Qin Daochuan, Qin Daochu, who grew up with him since childhood, said excitedly. I was just transferred back to Guanhai Xianqing by the young patriarch today. Great. Hearing the two reminiscing about the past, Qin Daoxian interrupted with a smile. Okay, let's talk about the reminiscence later. How is the research on the task I gave you? It's been almost half a year. Successful, successful. Hearing Chen Daoxian mentioning the task, Chen Daochu was all excited. Chapter 180. Young Patriarch, please take a look. Chen Daochu presented a treasure like a treasure, and took out a banknote that was very similar to his previous life. But look carefully. This paper currency is very different from the previous paper currency. The first is the difference in material. Chen Daoxian took the banknotes handed by Chen Daochu, and flicked it gently with his hand, making a rushing sound. This is paper. Chen Daoxian looked at each other in surprise. Yes, but not quite. Chen Daochu paused. To be precise, this is a special talisman paper we developed. Of course Chen Daoxian knew what a talisman was. The so-called talisman paper is to grind the rhizomes of lingzhi into pulp, and finally dehydrate the pulp, and then go through a series of processes to make it into the appearance of paper. Compared with the paper made by mortals, the talisman paper also changed the raw material from trees to spiritual plants. In the rest of the process, there is little difference between the two. However, because of the change in raw materials, the talisman paper is extremely tough, far less fragile than ordinary paper. Chen Daoxian took the talisman paper handed over by Chen Daochu, and then pressed lightly with his hand, but it did not tear it apart. See here. Chen Daoxian couldn't help showing a smile, and said, "It's interesting. However, this alone is far from meeting my requirements." Of course I don't know that. Chen Daochu smiled mysteriously, and then he brought a very strange magic weapon and said, "This is the key magic weapon to test this kind of paper money. This is." He looked at the square magic tool that Chen Daochu handed over. At the bottom of the magic tool, there was a glazed platform. Chen Daochu stretched out his hand and said, "Young Patriarch, please borrow the paper money." Heard. Chen Daoxian handed over the banknotes in his hand. Chen Daochu put the banknotes on the stage made of lioli. Next second, a strange lotus-shaped pattern appeared on the banknote. This. Chen Daoxian looked at the scene in front of him and felt very miraculous. At this moment, he did not feel any fluctuations in spiritual energy and infuriating energy, but there was a lotus flower-shaped pattern on the banknote, and it was shimmering with light. It's like the fluorescence emitted by the banknotes in the previous life under the money detector. Chen Daochu immediately took the banknotes away from the square instrument, and immediately returned to its original appearance. Seeing this, Chen Daoxian couldn't help but be very curious and said, "How did you do it?" Material and pattern. Chen Daochu stretched out 2 fingers, then pointed at a 7 or 8-year-old boy in the crowd, and said, "It's him who found this material." Oh. Hearing this, Chen Daoxian looked at a rather silent 7 or 8-year-old child in the crowd, recalled it carefully, and said, "Your name is Chen Fulai, right?" "Right." Chen Fulai nodded. Chen Daoxian also taught the first batch of monks who entered the school. With the cultivator's memory, it is not surprising to recognize Chen Fulai. "How did you discover this material?" Chen Daoxian asked. "I discovered this new type of talisman paper by accident when I taught myself the inheritance of family talismans, but after I made this talisman paper, I couldn't make it into a magic talisman at all, so I didn't care. Later, I was selected by Mr. Daochu to enter the Changping Institute of Magical Instruments. We studied this new type of banknotes proposed by you, the Patriarch, but we could not find suitable paper. So I came up with this new type of talisman paper that I stumbled upon. I wanted to try it out, and it turned out to be a real success." Chen Daochu on the side sighed with emotion, "Speaking of which, we are also lucky. Although this kind of talisman paper cannot be used to make magic talismans, it can inscribe a very special pattern. After the array pattern is melted into the talisman paper, and then tested by the money detector we developed, it will emit a lotus-shaped fluorescence, just like what you just saw, young Patriarch." You mean? This talisman paper has a pattern on it. Isn't it a magic weapon? Qin Daoxian frowned. The banknotes he needed were easy to make, but had a high enough anti-counterfeiting threshold. Right now, this kind of anti-counterfeiting threshold is high enough, but it is not easy to make. Incorporating the array pattern means that this inconspicuous banknote is a magic weapon. Without a specific refining method, who can imitate it? Young patriarch, listen to me, although this paper currency is a special magic weapon, because the pattern is simple, as long as the cultivator in the qi refining stage is proficient in mastering it, it can be engraved in an instant. Right. Yes, very simple. Hear the chorus of the crowd. Qin Daoxian said noncommittally, how simple is it, heard. Qin Daochu hurriedly handed over a jade slip. Qin Daoxian took the jade slip and sank his consciousness into it. Next second. With a strange expression on his face, he pulled out his divine sense from the inside of the jade slip. This array pattern is indeed simple enough, or, if Qin Daochu didn't say that it was an array pattern, he even doubted that there was such a simple array in the world. But no matter how simple the formation pattern is, once the formation is integrated into the tool, no matter how high the cultivator is, it is impossible to see what the formation pattern looks like. Otherwise, wouldn't the family cultivator be able to reversely introduce the refining method of high-level spirit armor by purchasing high-level spirit armor? This is obviously impossible. At the speed of 12 people in our research institute, we can make this semi-finished banknote into a finished product. About 1 cup of tea can make 100 pieces. 1 cup of tea makes 100 pieces. If it is refined for 5 hours a day, that is 6,000 banknotes, and the denomination of one banknote is 100 spirit stone coins, which is 600,000 spirit stone coins. 1 month is 18 million spirit stone coins. If you increase the number of people, this speed will be even faster. Based on the current circulation demand of Guanhai Xiancheng, about 30 million spirit stone coins are needed, which is enough to maintain the normal operation of the entire Guanhai Xiancheng. Of course, the denomination of spirit stone coins cannot be only 100. In fact, Qin Daoxian divided the denominations of Lingshi coins into 13 types in total according to his previous life experience. There are 13 points, 2 points, 5 points, 1 corner, 2 corners, 5 corners, 1 yuan, 2 yuan, 5 yuan, 10 yuan, 20 yuan, 50 yuan, and 100 yuan. Some people may wonder. 1 cent, that is, 1% of the spirit stone coins, can you still buy things? Actually, the purchasing power of Lingshi is very strong. The reason why I felt that Lingshi couldn't help but spend it was because the things that Qin Daoxian usually bought were very precious treasures for monks. If you use spirit stones to buy bulk materials used by ordinary people, 1 spirit stone can buy a lot of things. Then, he only spent 1 spirit stone when he bought a young and beautiful slave girl from Izumo. If you use spiritual stones to buy food for ordinary people, you don't know how much you need to buy a single spiritual stone. Therefore, there is no problem in calculating the denomination of spirit stones with the minimum unit of points. Because even if it is a loose cultivator, there will be many servants behind them to serve them, and these ordinary people need to consume resources to eat and drink. These resources, if they are large transactions, are purchased with spirit stones. It is possible that small transactions between mortals will also be settled in currencies such as gold, silver and copper, but large transactions between monks will not agree with these 3 metal currencies. In order to feed their tens of millions of people, the Zhou family has always relied on the food grown by slaves driven by the loose cultivators of Guang'an Prefecture. To buy these grains, the currency for settlement is Lingshi. It is impossible for the loose cultivators to grow food for the Zhou family for no reason. Metals like gold, silver and bronze are of no use to monks. Therefore, if a large number of these 13 currencies are refined, the time required may be doubled. It's just that Qin Daoxian can't wait, he has to send more people. At the end of this month, he will start implementing his currency replacement plan. Anyone who knows economics knows it. The development of currency is also divided into stages. From a geographical point of view, currency can be divided into pilot, regional, and finally full popularization. From the perspective of the internationalization process, it can be divided into 4 stages. The first stage is the implementation of free convertibility of the balance of payments under the current account. In Qin Daoxuan's previous life, the renminbi had just completed this stage. To put it simply, the spirit stone coins will be freely exchangeable in trade among the major forces in Guang'an Prefecture in the future. And this is the first step in the monetary process. If one day, the spirit stone coins issued by Qin Daoxian will completely replace the spirit stones and become the only currency in circulation in this world. That also means that he unified everything in the world of immortals. Whether it is economic, military, or cultural, it is possible to achieve this effect only after all have been unified. Now, what Qin Daoxian wants to do is to put money on a pilot basis in the simplest way for any sovereign government. That is, inside Guanhai Xiancheng, use spirit stone coins. Want to do this? Acceptance, currency security, force security, the major clan forces in the immortal city of Guang'an Prefecture, and the cooperation of the coalition forces in the Western Defense Zone are all indispensable. Now it seems Qin Daoxian has solved 2 problems: acceptance and currency guarantee. Next, he also wants to let the major families in Guang'an Prefecture cooperate with him to implement this plan. But before that, he had to completely subdue the coalition army in the Western Defense Zone and turn this coalition army into his private army to some extent. Actually, Qin Daoxian had planned to carry out this plan as early as the beginning of the establishment of the Western Defense Zone coalition army. Because as long as you are interested, you will find out. There are very few family cultivators among the senior members of the coalition forces in the Western Defense Zone. Qin Daoxuan's direct subordinates had a total of 10,000 chiefs, among whom there were only 2 family cultivators, Zhou Muqing of the Zhou family and Wei Lidao of the Wei family. The rest of the people are all foundation-building cultivators from loose cultivators. The reason why so many scattered cultivators were chosen to be the military commanders of the coalition forces in the Western Defense Zone. It is Qin Daoxian who wants to completely subdue this army and turn it into a private army of his Qin family. Although Qin Daoxian is now the commander of the coalition forces in the Western Defense Zone, he relies on his own strength and potential. It's not how powerful the Qin family really is. Others do not say. There are very few available people in the Qin family. Except for the 10 monks of the Taoist generation, the monks of the Blessing generation have not grown up, and it is impossible to let them go out on their own. As Qin Daoxian said, for the rapid development of the Qin family, it is inevitable to use outsiders on a large scale. But it is also important to enable outsiders. That is to enable loose cultivators, and never enable family cultivators, because for a family cultivator, the most important thing is always his own family. In this regard, Qianyuan Jianzong and his Qin family are surprisingly similar to some extent. Chapter 181. Sequoia Island. View Haixinqing. The main hall of the Allied Forces headquarters in the Western Defense Zone. A flash of light flew towards the hall. The person who came was a middle-aged cultivator in armor. The cultivator was burly, and with this spirit armor, he didn't look like a cultivator, but a natural soldier. Push the door in. Lei Zhen saw in the hall a Taoist man wearing a blue Taoist robe, a jade crown on his head, and his hands behind his back. This person is his immediate boss, Qin Daoxian. Lei Zhen recruited soldiers in 957 of the Qianyuan calendar, and served as a soldier in Yunmengguan on the front line of the Izumo kingdom. After 5 years, he retired and returned. Qin Daoxian turned around, looked at Lei Zhen who was standing towards him, and said with a smile, General Lei, why did you stay on the front line of Izumo and choose to return to the backwater of Guang'an Prefecture? Heard. Lei Jin was silent. After a long time, he bowed his hands and said, Your Majesty Commander, most of the garrison in Yunmengwan are from Jingzhou. I am a Tsangzhou cultivator. Came back. Qin Daoxian could hear that this should be Lei Jin's heartfelt words. Since the fall of Jinan Pass, Tsangzhou cultivators who went to serve on the front line could only go to Xianqing Xiongguan, where they were stationed in other states. And since the news of the Tsangzhou cultivator losing Zhenengguan became public, other states have despised the Tsangzhou cultivator. You can imagine the humiliation you receive when you become a soldier on someone else's territory. In addition, Lei Jin's character is not very charming, and he is more likely to be excluded. Hear this. Qin Daoxuan's mood was also a little heavy. The loss of Zhenengguan is the pain in the hearts of all the monks in Tsangzhou, and this pain has not healed with the passage of time. On the contrary, due to the subsequent series of losses to Tsangzhou cultivators' reputation and interests, it became more and more serious. He took a few steps forward, patted Lei Jin on the shoulder, and said, General Lei, rest assured, my Tsangzhou cultivator will definitely take back the fairy city of Zhenengguan. Lei Jin seemed to remember some bad memories, red eyes, and nodded. Seeing that the atmosphere was a little solemn, Qin Daoxian took Lei Jin's hand, and after separating from his guest of honor, he said, General Lei, don't talk about these unhappy things. Counting the days, it has been nearly a year since you came to our Western Defense Zone Coalition Army. Lei Jin thought about it and said, 11 months and 7 days. General Lei has a good memory. Qin Daoxian smiled and said calmly, Right now, the tide of corpses on Lianhua Island is low, and the coalition forces in the Western Defense Zone will not always exist. I don't know what General Lei's plans will be in the future. Hear this. Lei Jin opened his mouth, not knowing how to answer. Half an hour. He shook his head bitterly and said, Maybe, go back to my island and instruct mortals to farm. Apart from cultivating, I don't know any methods of alchemy and alchemy. It seems that there is no other way out than to cultivate food for the big clan in exchange for a little spiritual stone. This time, Qin Daoxian was surprised. Based on your cultivation, General Lei, isn't there any family in Guang'an that invited you to be a Kaching cultivator? Yes, of course there is, Lei Jin nodded, and then smiled bitterly, but Kuqing just said it nicely, but in fact, he is just a lackey of the big family. Although I, Lei Jin, are down and out, I am not enough to be a lackey of the big family, heard. Qin Daoxian tapped the seat lightly, making a rattling sound. This Lei Jin was simple and honest on the surface, but he was actually very shrewd. Before Qin Daoxian could say anything, Lei Jin blocked his next words. He Lei Jin is not willing to be the lackey of the big family, how can he be willing to be the lackey of the Qin family? After all, although the Qin family was also recognized by the Guang'an family, but in terms of strength, there was still a gap between them and the family. Even now that Qin Daoxian has successfully converted the Qianyuan sword classic, the power of the real yuan has soared by 70%, and he can vaguely touch the limit state real yuan mentioned in the Qianyuan sword classic. On strength. If the current Qin Daoxian encounters the original Zifu zombie again, he will no longer be on a par with it. Maybe there is no 10,000 corpse bloody array to repair its injuries, and Qin Daoxian will have the opportunity to kill it. In other words, now Qin Daoxuan's strength is 3 points stronger than that of ordinary cultivators in the early period of Zifu. The strength of the Qin family is naturally rising, but it is still not as good as the Zhou family and the Yang family. Since Lei Jin can even refuse the solicitation of Zhou Yang's family, let alone the Qin family. Knowing the difficulty of recruiting, Qin Daoxian didn't care, and said with a smile, I take the liberty to ask, is General Lei Guigung this year? Hear this. Lei Jin seemed a little unhappy in his heart, but still clasped his fists and said, Lei is 87 years old this year. 87 years old, building the 8th floor of the foundation. Are you a cultivator of Tianlingen? Qin Daoxian said seriously. Yes. Lei Zhen nodded, but compared to your sword cultivators. Lei Zhen shook his head in disappointment. What about the cultivators of Tianlingen? Although Tianlingen is one of a million cultivators, there are at least hundreds of thousands of cultivators in Guang'an Prefecture. Looking at the entire Zhangzhou, the Tianlingen cultivator has increased tenfold or even dozens of times. There are dozens of states in the entire Wangxinghai, although Tianlingen cultivator is considered a genius, but if it is Tianjiao, it is far from enough. Only sword cultivators like Zhou Mubai and Qin Daoxian can truly be called the arrogance among cultivators. Qin Daoxian finally knew why Lei Zhen was so high-spirited that he didn't want to be a high-ranking guest. At the age of 87, he reached the 8th floor of the foundation building, and it would take less than 10 years at most to reach the 9th floor of the foundation building. At that time, it is to polish the real essence and prepare to break through the Zifu. At Lei Zhen's age, if he goes to the front line again and accumulates resources, I am afraid that he is really expected to be promoted to the Zifu period. After all, the lifespan of a foundation building cultivator is as much as 200 years. Lei Zhen polished his true yuan to a perfect state, and he was probably less than 110 years old. Completely in time to break through the Purple Mansion. The only pity is that Lei Zhen is not a family cultivator, and all the training resources he needs must be earned by himself. If the children of the big family had this kind of talent, they would have been trained as court children long ago. Just like Zhou Mubai and Yang Gongwan. For this reason, Qin Daoxian no longer covered it up. He bowed his hands and said, if my Qin family is willing to offer all the resources of General Lei to break through the Zifu, I wonder if General Lei is willing to be my guest of the Qin family. You mean, all the resources to break through to the Zifu period? Lei Zhen was so anxious that he even forgot his honorary title. That's right. Qin Daoxian nodded, not only that, in the future, my Qin family is also willing to help General Lei to open up a family of immortals and pass down the line of Taoism from generation to generation. Hear this. Lei Zhen's breath suddenly became short, and he cupped his hands and said, Master Commander, no, Master Chen's words are true. What's wrong with this? If General Lei doesn't believe it, what will I swear? No, no need. Lei Zhen waved his hands again and again. Lei Zhen can trust the promise of a sword repairer. Done. Lei Zhen immediately stood up from his seat and stood upright in front of Qin Daoxian. Immediately, he pushed the golden mountain, down the jade pillar, and knelt down and said, Lei Mao is willing to drive the Qin family in the future, until he dies. Okay. Qin Daoxian was overjoyed. He stepped forward quickly, lifted Lei Zhen with both hands, and laughed loudly, General Lei, please get up quickly. Wait until the other person stands up. Qin Daoxian smiled and said, my Qin family can get the help of General Lei, which is like a tiger with wings. The Lord's words, the subordinates must not dare to take it. Lei Zhen said modestly. Although he was arrogant, he did not dare to show any arrogance in front of such a young swordsman. Because in terms of talent potential, Qin Daoxian can't stop him for 18 streets. This truth was deeply understood when he was defeated by Qin Daoxian with a sword at the Zhou family residence. Today, he is willing to become a guest of the Qin family and serve the Qin family as the master. In addition to the conditions that Qin Daoxian has given him that he cannot refuse, there is another important reason, that is, the worship of the strong. Humans are born to worship the strong, and the strong will only worship the stronger. Lei Zhen is a typical such person. After subduing Lei Zhen and watching the pair leave, Qin Daoxian breathed a sigh of relief. Outside the door. Qin Daochuan was waiting outside with a cultivator of the 9th level of qi refining. When he saw Lei Zhen pushing out the door, Qin Daochuan hurriedly smiled and cupped his hands. Lei Zhen knew that Qin Daochuan's status in the Qin family was not low, so he didn't dare to despise him because of his low cultivation level, and quickly returned the salute. Wait until Lei Zhen leaves. Chen Daochuan pushed the door and walked into the hall. Young Patriarch. Chen Daochuan bowed his hands. Chen Daoxian raised his head. Where is the person you invited? Waiting outside the hall. Call. Chen Daoxian breathed a sigh of relief. In the past few days, I have finally captured 7 of the 8 scattered repairmen in the Western Defense Zone coalition to my Qin family. Hear this. Chen Daochuan suddenly said with a smile on his face, congratulations to the young patriarch. Now, there are only Zhou Mucheng of the Zhou family, Wei Lidao of the Wei family, and the ignorant middle-stage foundation building casual cultivator. Talking about that ignorant loose cultivator, Chen Daoxuan's face was a little ugly. He, the commander of the coalition forces in the Western Defense District, the patriarch of the Qin family, and Corporal Li Xian, was rejected by him. Chen Daoxian was naturally a little unhappy in his heart. You must know that although other big clans will also recruit loose cultivators, they all send individuals out to recruit them. How could the dignified young patriarch, like Chen Daoxian, come to recruit them in person? The most important thing is that the other party actually refused. This made Chen Daoxian very uncomfortable. He thought that the conditions he gave were high enough. Since the other party was unwilling, Chen Daoxian would not let him continue to sit in the position of the commander of the Allied troops in the Western Defense Zone. Since it cannot be used by him, such a person will not be an eyesore if he is placed under his command. As the commander of the Western Defense District, Chen Daoxian had 10,000 reasons to dismiss him. The Allied forces headquarters will not be unhappy with Chen Daoxian because of this trivial matter. Otherwise, Zhou Mingho's investment in him would have been a waste of money. Taking a deep breath, Chen Daoxian nodded and said, "Let him come in." "Yes, young patriarch." Chen Daochuan bowed his hands, and then the people waiting outside the hall of sound transmission let him in. Take a closer look. Chen Daoxian discovered that the 9th-level qi refining cultivator in front of him was actually an old acquaintance. Chapter 182. The middle-aged fat cultivator in front of him is no one else. It was the 9th-level qi refining cultivator whom Chen Daoxian met on the way when he attended Yang Linyuan's Zifu banquet. Can't believe how many years have passed. The other party finally polished his infuriating energy to near perfection, and he was approaching the critical point of foundation building. Chen Daoxian still remembered that the fat monk's name seemed to be Zhang Zhixian, and his family was good at making magic talismans. Dao Yu Zhang, Chen Daoxian stood up with a smile, bowed his hands and said, "I haven't seen you for many years, Dao Yu Zhang, stay safe." Seeing this handsome face, tall and straight in front of him, a young cultivator with a hint of coercion all over his body, Zhang Zhixian simply did not dare to combine him with the 7th-level qi refining cultivator in his memory. How many years has it been? The other party actually succeeded in building the foundation. Not only that, but at this moment, he became the master of the heroic city under his feet. This made Zhang Zhixian adapt to it. Junior Zhang Zhixian, I have met Senior Chen. Zhang Zhixian didn't dare to act recklessly because he had a relationship with Chen Daoxian before, and quickly bowed. Fellow Daoist Zhang doesn't have to be like this, since we are old friends, you and I should be friends of the same generation. Chen Daoxian said with a smile. This. Zhang Zhixian carefully looked at Chen Daoxuan's face, saw his sincere expression, and knew that he was not cheating, and a warm feeling surged in his heart. He quickly cupped his hands and said, "I have seen fellow Daoist Chen." "Haha," Chen Daoxian said with a smile, "I didn't expect to meet an old friend here today. It seems that the relationship between you and me is really close, heard." Zhang Zhixian couldn't help nodding, his chubby face grinned into a ball, and his eyes were almost squeezed out of sight. "If I remember it well, isn't Zhang Daoyu's family near Lingbei Island? Why did you come to me to watch Haixian City?" Chen Daoxian asked curiously. Zhang Zhixian smiled bitterly and said, "Dao Yuchen doesn't know anything. Last time I attended the banquet of Yang Laozi's Purple House, I was received by Yang Laozu after the Taoist friend. The Yang family wanted to recruit me to join the Guang'an Xianmeng, but I refused. He paused. I'm afraid that my Zhang family's actions will offend the Guang'an Immortal Alliance, and I will not be able to stand in the Guang'an Immortal Alliance in the future, so I migrated here with my clan. In just a few words, Zhang Zhixian fully demonstrated the helplessness of a small family in front of the big forces. Although Chen Daoxian also rejected the invitation of Guang'an Xianmeng, because Shuanghu Island is far from Lingbei Island, he is not afraid that Guang'an Xianmeng will give him Chen's shoes. Say it again. Chen Daoxian succeeded in building the foundation soon after, and his strength soared to the point where he was comparable to a cultivator of the Zifu today. Even Yang Linyuan wanted his Yang family Tianjiao to make amends to Chen Daoxian. How could he offend the newly rising Chen family? Zhang Zixian's family does not have such a talented person as Chen Daoxian. If they continue to stay in the boundary of Lingbei Island, even the Yang family will not take the initiative to attack a mere qi refining family. But with so many families in the Guang'an Xianmeng united, it's hard to say whether there are people who see him upset and want to take revenge. At that time, the Zhang family's situation will be difficult. Therefore, Zhang Zixian's behavior can only be said to be helpless. Hear the other person's explanation. Chen Daoxian nodded clearly, and then smiled. How is it? How is your Zhang family's magic charm business in Guanhai Xianqing now? When it comes to family business, Zhang Zixian's face finally shows a touch of joy. He smiled and said, now the war between the East Defense Zone and the Lianhu Island Corps Group is in full swing, and the demand for magic charms on the front line is quite large. My Zhang family's business is quite good, heard. Chen Daoxian nodded. If he remembered correctly, now there is only the Zhang family who sells magic charms in the entire Guanhai Xianqing. The current Zhang family is quite similar to the Chen family who used to sell magic tools in Xianqing, Guang'an Prefecture. It is also full of vigor, and the family has ushered in the opportunity for development. To some extent. The corpse chaos in Guang'an Mansion this time also reshuffled the whole pattern of Guang'an Mansion. The Zhao family of Guang'an Prefecture was completely destroyed. Because the Wu family was slaughtered and more than 100 foundation building cultivators were slaughtered, and it was close to the corpse tide, it would inevitably decline in the future. Instead, the rise of the Qin family. Although the Qin family's current cultivators are still young, there are not many cultivators of the Taoist generation. But only a discerning person can see that the rise of the Qin family is unstoppable. Just relying on Chen Daoxian, a genius swordsman in his 20s, means that the Qin family has the potential to become a Jindan family in the future. How could such a family not rise up? Of course. In addition to the rise of the emerging big family of the Qin family in Guang'an Prefecture, other small families have also ushered in opportunities for development one by one. Zhang Zixian's family is only one of them, but by no means the only one. From this point of view, war is indeed something that can break down hierarchies. Without this war, the Qin family would have risen, but the process was definitely not as fast as it is now. Without the approval of the Zhou family, as well as the 80 million spirit stones allocated to the Western Defense Area by the Guang'an Prefecture Allied Forces, how can the Qin family have the ability to build a fairy city on Sequoia Island? Let's wait at least another decade or a few decades. This war has accelerated the rise of the Qin family by at least 10 years. This is what Qin Xianhe told him, crisis is both danger and opportunity. For the Qin family, the corpse chaos in Guang'an is an opportunity. For some reason, Chen Daoxian didn't even want the war on the front line to end. Because the end of the war means that it will be difficult for the Qin family to reap such huge war dividends. Nowadays, with the gradual expansion of the production capacity of Changping Pharmaceutical Factory and Hongyin Feijian Factory, every month, the profit from selling the pills and instruments to the front line is as many as millions of spirit stones. Although more than 1 million spirit stones were exchanged for military exploits, there were also more than 1 million spirit stones in pure profits. Although not every month has such a profit of more than 1 million spirit stones. But in the past 10 months, nearly 10 million spiritual stones have been accumulated for the Qin family. In other words, the Qin family's spiritual stones for cultivating third-order spiritual veins are almost ready. The two chatted up. The relationship is quite familiar. Seeing that the atmosphere was almost over, Qin Daoxian said directly, "I am dissatisfied with Dao Yuzhang. I have invited you to come here this time. There is indeed something to discuss." Hearing this, Zhang Zhixian raised his eyebrows slightly, stood up and cupped his hands, with a hard smile on his face. "No. I don't know what Dao Yuqin said. What is it?" "See him like this." Qin Daoxian smiled and waved his hand, motioning for the other party to sit down. "Wait until the other person is seated again." Qin Daoxian continued, "I wonder if you feel that it is quite inconvenient to trade with spirit stones?" Inconvenient? Zhang Zhixian was stunned for a moment, and then he remembered that the Zhang family's income had skyrocketed in the past few months, with a monthly income of more than 100,000 spirit stones. Coupled with the transportation of goods, it is indeed a bit inconvenient to store and transport. If the Zhang family's business scale is further expanded in the future, this inconvenience will definitely become more significant. It's really inconvenient to settle goods with spirit stones, but fortunately there are storage bags, so it's not too inconvenient. Zhang Zhixian didn't know the deep meaning of Qin Daoxian's words, so he had to say so. Qin Daoxian is no nonsense. He took out a spirit stone coin, handed it over, and said, "I plan to promote this new type of currency in Guang'an Prefecture, and I call it a spirit stone coin. The value of this spirit stone coin is 100 yuan, which is equivalent to 100 spirit stones." Zhang Zhixian took the Lingshi coin handed over by Qin Daoxian and remained silent. "Fellow Daoist Zhang, don't get me wrong, my Qin family is not a white wolf with empty gloves, and I want to use this paper money to get the spirit stones of each of your families. I just want it to circulate in Guanhai Xiancheng instead of spirit stones. If you go out of the city to trade with other people, you can use this spirit stone coins to exchange for spirit stones at any time." How shrewd Zhang Zhixian was, he immediately sniffed out the smell. He hesitated and said, "But in this way, each family in Guanhai Xiancheng has a collection of spiritual stones stored in your Qin family's hands." "Indeed so." Qin Daoxian nodded without denying. "Hear this." Zhang Zhixian breathed a sigh of relief. For him, the problems that can be solved with spirit stones are not big problems. What he was most afraid of was that the Qin family also learned from the Guang'an Immortal Alliance and organized some kind of alliance. He Zhang family has small arms and calves, and he really can't participate in this kind of clan conflict game. Foreseeable. In the future, if there is a conflict between the Guang'an Immortal Alliance and the Zhou family, there is a high probability that nothing will happen to the Yang family and the Zhou family, but the small family of the Guang'an Immortal Alliance will definitely suffer a lot. These small families put themselves on their thighs because they thought they had joined the Guang'an Immortal Alliance, and they raised their eyebrows in Guang'an Mansion from then on. As everyone knows, this is the most stupid behavior. Others compete with big clans, and your small clan joins together, besides becoming cannon fodder. Is there a second end to it? At this point, Zhang Zhixian was extremely sober. As for the spirit stone coin launched by Qin Daoxian, in his opinion, he just wanted to make a rude slap on the various families in Guanhai Xiancheng. Although this delicious taste is a little ugly. But Zhang Zhixian is not incomprehensible. After all, to build this immortal city, the Qin family will definitely spend a lot of money. Not to mention the others, it will cost more than 10 million spiritual stones to build a third-order spiritual vein. Not to mention that the Qin family also built more than a dozen second-order spiritual veins around Sequoia Island for the migrating loose cultivators and small family cultivators to cultivate spiritual fields and elixir. This is another huge expense. In addition, the construction of Immortal City is the most expensive. It is difficult for Zhang Zhixian to imagine how much the Chen family paid to build this fairy city. Although it seems that this fairy city is far from complete. This just proves that the Chen family might have been hollowed out, and had to come up with this clumsy method to fight the autumn breeze against the major families in Guanhai Xiancheng. Think of this. Zhang Zhixian immediately cupped his hands and said, since it is the decree of Guanhai Xiancheng, my Zhang family should abide by it. Seeing Zhang Zhixian being so knowledgeable, Chen Daoxian nodded with satisfaction. Okay, fellow Daoist Zhang is really refreshing. Hey. Zhang Zhixian breathed a sigh of relief, the two smiled at each other, and the atmosphere was very harmonious. The two chatted again. Chen Daoxian stood up to send them off in person. This gesture made Zhang Zhixian terrified. Watching Zhang Zhixian leave. Standing aside, Chen Daochuan, who had not spoken, murmured, this is it, his Zhang family is willing to take out this spiritual stone. Hearing this, Chen Daoxian smiled and said, how about being willing, what about not being willing? You know, this is the territory of my Chen family, and the words of my Chen family are the rules here. If they want to gain a foothold here, they can only abide by the rules of my Chen family. Daochuan, you have to adapt to your own identity. Chen Daochuan looked at the domineering Chen Daoxian, and was speechless. Chapter 183, the next month. Chen Daoxian kept summoning the various families who came to Guanhai Xiancheng to establish a foothold every day, as well as the loose cultivators who chose to open a shop in Guanhai Xiancheng, to promote spirit stone coins to them. Guanhai Xiancheng was newly built soon. Although it is not yet completed, many businesses have already settled in it. The entire Immortal City, although not as popular as Lingde Immortal City, is also becoming more and more prosperous. No way, monks need a lot of resources for cultivation, and no monk can produce any resources. This point is that the big family and even the sect forces cannot avoid it. Therefore, trade exchanges are very important for any cultivation force in this world. The stronger the cultivation force, the more prosperous its business activities tend to be. After all, only when the economy is prosperous will there be enough resources to give birth to more powerful monks. This is not much different from the previous life. Just as Chen Daoxian imagined, under his power, no family or loose cultivator who opened a shop dared to refuse to use the spirit stone coins. Of course, this means of pushing spirit stone coins forcibly. It will definitely leave the image of the Chen family as arrogant and domineering and greedy for money. But Chen Daoxian didn't care. How can outsiders see the benefits of a currency that is deeply rooted in the hearts of the people? Now they are repelling, and even rely on Chen Daoxian to use his strength to oppress the other party, forcing them to use the spirit stone coins in Guanhai Xiancheng. But after they used it for a while, they felt the benefits of the spirit stone coins. It must be felt that banknotes have too many advantages over spirit stones. In Chen Daoxuan's view, using spiritual stones as currency is not even as good as gold and silver in ancient times. At least gold and silver as currency, its reserves are fixed and will not suddenly decrease for no reason. The spirit stone is different. In addition to the currency attribute, it also has an important function, cultivating the spirit veins. Whether it was the Guang'an Xianmeng's construction of the spiritual veins, or the Zhou family's construction of the spiritual veins, a lot of spiritual stones were spent. After a large amount of spirit stones were consumed, the market in Guang'an Prefecture ushered in a shortage of spirit stones. This shortage of spiritual stones has caused a shortage of money in the entire Guang'an Prefecture. Many times, monks who lack spirit stones have to barter. But it goes without saying how inefficient bartering is. That is a backward economic phenomenon that only primitive societies have. Another important reason why Chen Daoxian insisted on promoting Lingshi coins is that the industrial production of Shuanghu Island will bring about a leap in productivity. Once these industrial products are put on the market, it will inevitably further aggravate the shortage of spirit stones. Now the industrial scale of the Qin family is small, and this phenomenon is not yet obvious. If the industrial scale of Shuanghu Island is expanded by 100 times, I am afraid that the spirit stones of the entire Guang'an prefecture will be concentrated in the transaction and circulation of the Qin family and the outside world, which will not be enough. By then, the industrial development of Shuanghu Island will inevitably be greatly hindered. If the development of industry depends on trade, then currency is the medium of trade, but this medium is not strong enough, and industrial development will inevitably be hindered. In the eyes of outsiders, Qin Daoxuan's move may be rash, but in fact, it is to clear the obstacles in advance for the industrialization of Shuanghu Island. A month later. The main hall of the Allied Forces headquarters in the Western Defense Zone. 10,000 soldiers, together with Qin Daoxian, sat upright in the hall. A long time. Wei Lidao of the Wei family stood up first and cupped his hands. Mr. Qi, the commander-in-chief, tomorrow will be the day to pay the soldiers of the coalition troops in the Western Defense Zone, but the spirit stones in our army seem to. Wei Lidao felt the oppression of Qin Daoxian, but he didn't dare to say what he said. Qin Daoxian raised his eyelids slightly and said with a smile, "Since tomorrow is the day when the army is paid, I have to say a few words. Everyone knows that although there are 80 million spirit stones in the military expenditure of our Western Defense Zone, this military expenditure seems to be a lot, but after careful study, it is not much. Purchase magic tools for soldiers, cultivate spiritual veins, build immortal cities, and distribute military salaries. As a result, military spending is already tight, but in this case, there are still people who dare to embezzle military spending." Qin Daoxuan's voice involuntarily increased a bit. "You said, for this kind of phenomenon, can we tolerate this kind of phenomenon, up to the commander, down to the soldier in the Western Defense Zone, heard?" The crowd watched their eyes and noses and their hearts, and remained silent. But as we all know, since Qin Daoxian said this, he must be attacked. Lei Zhen suddenly stood up and said loudly, "All our sergeants in the Western Defense Area, in order to build the Immortal City, and to patrol the entire Western Defense Area, not only can't sleep at night, but even delay their own cultivation. That's it, there is still such a scum in our Western Defense Area, who can bear it?" "Yes. General Lei said it well. I can't bear it, this wind must not rise." "Right." Seeing everyone's approval, Zhou Muqing didn't say a word, and Wei Lidao beat his heart. "Xia Hong, don't get out yet." Qin Daoxuan's voice exploded in the long ears of a loose cultivator. "Heard." The face of this middle-stage foundation-building cultivator named Xia Hong became very ugly. He bit his head and stood up, cupped his hands and said, "Master Commander, I don't know what to do." "What's your order?" Qin Daoxian sneered, "Do you want me to scold you in public for your good deeds?" Hearing this, Xia Hong's expression changed again. His hands trembled slightly, his eyes were full of resentment, and he said in a trembling voice, "I hope the commander will make it clear. How to convict embezzlement of military expenses according to the Guang'an Prefecture Allied Forces military law." Hearing this, Zhou Muqing, who was in charge of the 10,000 soldiers and the military governor, stood up and said, "According to the laws of the coalition, those who embezzle military expenses in Mexico will be punished with different responsibilities according to the amount of military expenses in Mexico. Those who embezzle less than 100,000 spiritual stones will be dismissed from the army and punished with whipping and branding. Those who embezzle more than 100,000 spirit stones will be dismissed from the army and sentenced to the punishment of piercing nails. Those who embezzle more than 1 million spiritual stones shall be punished by death." Everyone listened. Qin Daoxian waved his hand and said to the outside of the hall, "Carry in." Next moment, a group of soldiers, carrying 15 shoulder-height boxes, slowly entered the hall. "Lord Commander, these are all spirit stones found in General Xia's Lingfu, heard?" Qin Daoxian nodded and said indifferently, "I see, you all go down." "Yes, Lord Commander." Watching the soldiers retreat, Chen Daoxian walked to the first box, waved his hand gently, and the box suddenly opened. I saw a box full of spirit stones inside. General Xia, what else do you have to say? Planned, it must be planted. When Xia Hong saw this scene, his eyes were red, as if he was going to choose someone to devour. It must be you. You saw that you couldn't recruit me, so you used this dirty method to frame me. Ah, Chen Daoxian sneered, you are a mere cultivator in the middle stage of foundation building, why would you let me, a sword cultivator, personally recruit you? After he finished speaking, he looked at Zhou Muqing again and said, what's the crime of the governor of Zhou, slandering Shangguan, in the coalition army? Dismissal investigation. Zhou Muqing cherishes his words like gold. Chen Daoxian nodded, picked up a spirit stone in the box at will, and said, TSK, this box of spirit stones, I am afraid there are more than 100,000 spirit stones, 15 boxes of spirit stones, General Xia has such a big appetite. Xia Hong's face was ashen, and there was a hint of despair in his eyes. 15 boxes of spirit stones are more than 1 million spirit stones. Execute. Thinking of this guilt, Xia Hong completely collapsed. It's you, it's you. It's you who framed me. I'm not guilty, I'm not guilty. Xia Hong's face flushed red, and he looked like a madman. Chen Daoxian. I have fought with you. Say it. Immediately, he slapped the storage bag at his waist, and a flying sword went straight to Chen Daoxian's face. This sword light is as fast as lightning in the eyes of outsiders, but in the eyes of Chen Daoxian, it is clumsy. I saw that he stretched out a finger, flicked forward lightly, and struck the tip of the flying sword. The next moment, Feijian let out a faint whimper and flew back quickly. Commander Zhou, what's the crime of attacking the commander? Capital offense. Zhou Muqing's words revealed a hint of murderous intent. When everyone saw this scene, they knew that Xia Hong was dead. This fool. Wei Lidao sighed secretly. Sword light incarnation. Chen Daoxian bullied his body with a sword finger and pointed at Xia Hong's Dantian Qi Si, smashing his Dantian Qi Si to pieces. Puff. Xia Hong spat out a mouthful of blood, and immediately fell down. The Dantian Qi Si was destroyed, and Xia Hong was completely destroyed. Seeing Chen Daoxian's ruthless scene, everyone felt a chill in their hearts at this moment, even if they were the 7 scattered cultivators who swore allegiance to his Chen family. But at the same time, I am also very happy in my heart. Fortunately, they agreed to Chen Daoxian's solicitation at the beginning, otherwise it would be them who would be abolished lying on the ground. Xia Hong struggled and wanted to stand up, but he couldn't get up with trembling. Chen Daoxian walked to the remaining 14 boxes and opened them one by one. I saw the remaining 14 boxes, and each box contained only 1 spirit stone. Chen Daoxian lowered his head, looked at Xia Hong, who couldn't get up, and sighed, General Xia, it's just embezzlement of hundreds of thousands of spiritual stones, and the crime is not worth death, why do you want to die? Then he shook his head and said, these boys, a spiritual stone is still packed in a box, isn't this scaring people? It's really. Hear this. Xia Hong was so angry that his eyes went black and he was unconscious. He didn't even look at Xia Hong, who was lying on the ground not knowing whether he was alive or dead. Chen Daoxian paced back to the first place, looked up at Wei Li and said, where did you just say? Ben, Commander, the subordinate just said, about the payment. Oh, yes, pay for the army. Chen Daoxian clapped his hands suddenly, look at my memory, don't mind me. Don't mind. Master Commander is busy with everything, it's normal to forget. Exactly. Zhou Muqing looked at the young figure sitting in the first place, and couldn't put him together with the young monks from other families who had to rely on themselves to intimidate other families in Sangxiafang City in Guang'an Prefecture a few years ago. The Qin family has really risen. At this moment, Zhou Muqing only had this thought in his mind. Qin Daoxian pressed lightly with his hand, and the hall returned to silence. I believe everyone has heard some rumors recently. Qin Daoxian paused. I'm going to use a new type of paper currency in Guanhai Xianqing to replace the spirit stone for transaction purposes. Chapter 184, said, he took out 2 full boxes of spirit stone coins from the storage bag. Comparing these 2 boxes with the box that was just carried into the hall, it was almost the difference between a child and an adult. Open the box. Contained a stack of neatly stacked coins. These banknotes looked quite like the currency of the previous life, and Qin Daoxian couldn't help but feel familiar for a while. This world, finally with his arrival, began to change a little bit. Although these changes are limited to Guanhai Xianqing in Guang'an Prefecture. But he believed that with the expansion of his forces, this change would gradually cover the entire Guang'an Prefecture and even the entire Zhangzhou. I'm sure some of you have seen this note. Qin Daoxian took out 900 yuan bills and distributed them to the 9 senior officers present. Though Lei Zhen heard that Guanhai Xianqing would use a brand new currency in the future, but it was the first time he saw it in detail. For a while. Can't help but be curious. He carefully looked at the banknote in his hand, and found that the back of it was a thumbnail of the entire Guang'an Prefecture, and the front depicted was the overall picture of Guanhai Xianqing. Looks majestic and has a very visual impact. In addition, the number 100 is written on the middle left of the banknote. Come to think of it, this is the 100 denomination spirit stone coin in the mouth of the Lord. Seeing the crowd do not speak. Qin Daoxian continued, my idea is to let the soldiers receive this new currency as military pay. This time. Everyone whispered. Zhou Muqing stood up and frowned, Master Commander, if this happens, will it cause the soldiers below to mutiny? Wei Lidao also nodded and said, yes, Lord Commander, after all, everyone only recognizes spirit stones in their hearts. A soldier in the late stage of qi refining is paid 500 spirit stones for a year, a soldier in the middle stage of qi refining is 300 spirit stones, and a soldier in the early stage of qi refining is 100 spirit stones. But now, soldiers in the late stage of qi refining can only take 5 banknotes, and soldiers in the early stage of qi refining can only take 1, this. Wei Lidao was speechless. Although the strength of a single qi refining stage soldier is low, but the entire Western Defense Zone is full of 100,000 qi refining period soldiers, plus 1,000 base building officers. Once the trouble arises, even if Qin Daoxian's strength is comparable to that of a cultivator in Zifu, he may not be able to. Repressed live. Qin Daoxian waved his hand and said, tell the soldiers below that there are too many spirit stones and it will be troublesome to issue. You can use the banknotes in your hand to go to the Chongping Central Bank, the largest in the central block of Guanhai Xianqing, and put the banknotes converted to spirit stones. Of course, if you don't want to exchange, you can directly use the spirit stone coins in your hand to buy goods in any store in Guang'an Prefecture. This. Everyone looked at each other in dismay. Wei Lidao was quite puzzled. Why do you need to do this, Lord Commander? Just tell the soldiers below that. Qin Daoxian waved his hand. In addition to the commander Qin Daoxian, 7 senior members of the coalition forces in the entire Western Defense District have been recruited by Qin Daoxian to become Qinjia Kaching. There were 3 people left. Xia Hong was abolished, and although Zhou Muqing had the post of warden, he had the most complicated relationship with Qin Daoxian, and it was impossible for him to stand up against him. As for Wei Lidao, he looked like he was trembling when he spoke. Is obviously afraid of Qin Daoxian to the core. Just started. Everyone also thinks that Qin Daoxian, the commander, is easy to talk. Everyone has been with him for nearly a year, but he has not seen 3 fires when he takes office as a new official. I didn't expect Qin Daoxuan's fire to burn so late and so fiercely, that in one face-to-face, a 10,000 commander of the coalition army was abolished. Regardless of whether Xia Hong was corrupt or not, someone else framed it. Said that he attacked Qin Daoxian in public, which was an obvious thing for all to see. Just based on this behavior, it is a capital offense wherever it is said. This is why Wei Lidao said he was stupid. If he doesn't take action against Qin Daoxian in public, there is still the possibility of refuting the matter of embezzling the spirit stone. Whether it is the oath of the Great Road or the questioning of the heart, he can clear his grievances. Even if the grievances cannot be completely remedied, the big deal is dismissal from the military, but the crime will definitely not lead to death. But he was so anxious that he attacked Shengguan and put the biggest handle in the hands of Qin Daoxian. At this time, no matter who comes to condemnation, he will not escape death. This is also the reason why Wei Lidao is afraid of Qin Daoxian. In his eyes, although Qin Daoxian is young, he is cruel. What's even more terrifying is that this person is still tyrannical. Qin Daoxian has everything in his means and strength, how could he dare to contradict Qin Daoxian again? The question was raised just now, and I was also worried that Qin Daoxuan's forcible push of spirit stone coins in the army might cause more trouble. At that time, Qin Daoxian as the commander may not be in trouble. But they, the tens of thousands of soldiers who issued specific orders, might have to throw one or two out to stabilize the morale of the army. And Wei Lidao is the one who is most likely to be thrown out to quell the anger of the soldiers. Because of his personal relationship with Qin Daoxian, he is inferior to Zhou Mucheng. In terms of the speed of surrender, he is not as good as Lei Zhen and other lore cultivators. The candidate to take the blame can only be him. But now, Qin Daoxian has explained that he can go to Changping Central Bank to exchange spirit stones with spirit stone coins. Wei Lidao's hanging heart also let go. This move is nothing more than changing the location of the military salaries of the coalition forces in the Western Defense Zone to the Changping Central Bank in Guanhai Xiancheng. Is a little more troublesome for the soldiers. But for this trivial matter, how could the soldiers in the Qi refining period dare to look for the Shengguan in the foundation building period to show their teeth? The next day, in the barracks of the coalition forces in the Western Defense Zone, a group of soldiers lined up facing the pay distribution office. Overlooked from above. In front of the 6 military pay distribution points, 6 long queues lined up. What are you doing? Aren't you giving out spirit stones? How can you give me a piece of paper? After a hot-tempered soldier got 5 spirit stone coins of 100 denominations in his hand, he burst out immediately. What are you yelling? Don't you have eyes? The person in front of him who was in charge of distributing the military salaries was a cultivator in the early stage of foundation building. At this moment, the momentum of the foundation building stage was pressing on the soldier in the later stage of Qi refining, and he almost didn't push the opponent down. The troublesome soldier immediately calmed down. Bowed his hands towards the officer who issued the military salary, and said, "Sorry, forgive me, this subordinate didn't mean it. It was just a moment of indignation." Seeing that the soldier's mood had stabilized, the base-building cultivator who paid the military salaries nodded slightly, pointed to the bulletin not far away, and said, "Learn to read and see for yourself, finished." Ignored the soldier at the late stage of Qi refining, and began to pay the soldiers behind him. Nie Zhong is a late-stage Qi refining loose cultivator in Guang'an Prefecture. At the very beginning, he was a spiritual planter in the Zhou family's many spiritual veins. In other words, is also the tenant of the Zhou family, but he is the tenant who planted spiritual fields for the Zhou family. Speaking of which, the spiritual stones that Nie Zhong earns throughout the year are not necessarily as much as those of the loose cultivators who drive mortals to farm. After that, the Yang family led the formation of the Guang'an Immortal League, and built a large number of spiritual veins on the islands in the sea area of Jinwu Island. And invited scattered cultivators from the outside world to open up spiritual fields on these islands and plant spiritual medicines. This made Nie Zhong, who had been under pressure from the Zhou family for a long time, excited. Hurriedly packed up and rushed to the realm of Guang'an Xianmeng immediately. Pity. A year or two have passed since the good days, when the tide of corpses broke out on Lotus Island. The destruction of the Zhao family in Guang'an Prefecture has made all the loose cultivators in Guang'an Prefecture feel very concerned. He, a cultivator in the late stage of qi refinement in Niezhong district, is naturally extremely afraid. During that time, even when he practiced at night, he would be suspicious, for fear that the island he was on would be invaded by evil things like the Zhao family. Fortunately, the Zhou family took the lead and formed the Guang'an Prefecture Coalition Army, delineating 5 defense areas to protect the stability of the entire Guang'an Prefecture. Now, those restless cultivators finally have the backbone. It also includes Nie Zhong. Nie Zhong joined the Guang'an Prefecture Coalition Army right away. In his opinion, it was undoubtedly the safest among the Guang'an Prefecture coalition forces, because there were cultivators from Zifu in the coalition army. These small shrimps during the qi refining period are naturally full of security. The only pity is that he was not assigned to the Central Defense Zone. Because the Central Defense Zone is where the Zhou family is located, with the strength of the Zhou family, it is undoubtedly the safest place in the entire Guang'an Prefecture. However, it is better to be assigned to the Western Defense Zone. Although the Western Defense Zone is weak, it is not without advantages. That is, the West Defense Area is the farthest from the East Defense Area, and is the least likely to be attacked by the corpse tide on Lotus Island. In addition, the Qin family in the West Defense Zone also cultivated spiritual veins on the islands near Sequoia Island for the scattered cultivators to open up spiritual fields and plant spiritual medicines. This time, Nie Zhong's mind completely settled down. He has already made plans for the future. He will first serve in the coalition forces in the Western Defense Zone. When the service is over, he should have accumulated a considerable amount of spiritual stones in his hands. By the time he went to the spiritual veins around Sequoia Island to rent land to cultivate spiritual fields. Anyway, with his spiritual planting skills, it was a piece of cake for him to open up spiritual fields. As far as he knows, the spiritual veins cultivated by the Chen family around Sequoia Island are not only of the second rank. And the cost of renting land is also much lower than that of Guang'an Xianmeng and Zhou family. That's how it goes. In the future, he will not only be able to open up spiritual fields, but even have enough spiritual stones to grow spiritual medicines with higher economic value. Just when he was full of longing for the outside world and was about to receive the first military pay in his life, he found that he only received 5 banknotes. What banknotes? These are 5 talismans. Although he didn't know what material these 5 talisman papers were made of, Nie Zhong, who had been dealing with Lingji all day, could still keenly smell the scent of Lingji on the talisman papers. With 5 talismans, he wanted to covet his military pay for a year of hard patrolling. At this moment, General Nie Zhong's anger and humiliation that he had been oppressed by the big family for so many years all erupted. But before he could be stubborn for a few seconds, under the pressure of the foundation-building cultivator's momentum, he was instantly cowardly again. Sanson followed the instructions of the senior official who established the foundation. Looking at the explanation on the list on the side, Nie Zhong understood the purpose of the paper money in his hand. Can I exchange spirit stones at Changping Central Bank in Guanhai Xiancheng? Can I spend it directly in shops in Guanhai Xiancheng? Is it true? Nie Zhong muttered. Hurry up, if you're late, the spirit stones of the Changping Central Bank will all be exchanged. Yes, these big figures came up with this kind of paper money, it must be a new trick that the spirit stones are not enough to pay the army. Quick! Let's hurry over there. You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.